Do board members have any, Ms. Garcia, did you want to take questions from board members? It's up to you. Okay. Do board members have any questions for the representative? Ms. Avella?
Just,
Go ahead, John.
Ms. Garcia, just to be clear, this school had approximately July 2008 to June 2016 to have that long of a record, and counting rather quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out of that entire time period, they only had 6 quarters that met state standards. Out of approximately, I'm sorry, 40. Out of 40 quarters, they only had 6 that met state standards. And you're asking us to change the law to allow a school with this record of poor functioning to accept students and their money and have them have a low pass rate of not either students getting such a poor education they don't take the NCLEX, or take the NCLEX and fail with no hope of getting their money's worth of an education they are guaranteed by contract. And you're asking to allow them 6 months to continue teaching, take students' money, and not get the education they're paying for. In this case, I think it's imperative, because these students are also consumers, and our job is to protect the consumer from schools that are not fulfilling their end of the contract. So I would have to disagree about 6-month leeway when a school has this long of a track record of poor performance, accepting money, and not giving the education that's being paid for. Would be a disservice to the consumers of California, and that schools with this record need to be closed once the information, the data, the investigation have been completed. We do need to take action to prevent others from paying into a program where they're not getting their money. There are many other schools, all the ones sitting here, that are doing what they're supposed to be doing, training some of the best nurses in the state or in the nation. They are providing the education that they are sworn to do by contract and by moral obligation. And I will not have their school put in the same status as a school that is not performing in this manner. And it would be a disservice to classify a school like this in the same category as schools that are doing their job, meeting their obligation, and doing it very well, or doing their darndest to achieve it. So I have to ardently disagree with your 6-month delay.
Thank you, Mr. Fertitta.
Thank you, Mr. Fertitta. May I comment?
Yeah.
Mr.
Just 1
Fertitta?
second, please. I just wanted to make sure I understand you. It was more of a general comment you had, or was there a specific question?
It was more of a comment, but the question was why the 6-month delay when they have such a poor performance?
Ms. Garcia?
Thank you. I agree with you 100% in everything that you said. The request for an appeal was not to request that the school remain in operation. It was to argue the point, which there was no time to do so because it wasn't given the proper time, that even if you revoke the program and the students had to be removed and replaced into other programs where they could succeed, that this program would have an opportunity to gather its principles and what it prepares to do. Should you allow that program to continue at a later date, having new students come along, i.e., what I mean by that is, they would have 6 months to prepare a defense on not having to sell every asset, getting rid of every facility. It wasn't about moral judgment on what should they do according to all programs. It was simply about giving the opportunity to come back and discuss the reconsideration. Their point would have only been, remove the students, as is by law. We must take care of those. Take care of the consumer, as in by law. We must take care of that. But allow the program to take a step back for 6 months to gather its defense on why it should remain a program, even if it came back to request students if the consideration was taken. They recognize that revocation means to deploy the students to other programs. Hopefully they can get into other schools. But they didn't have an opportunity to argue the point that what do we do prior to the year that we have to come back and suggest that we open a new program. They wanted to do something in advance of having to wait that year. The 6 months would have allowed them that.
Thank you for that clarification. I know we do have more questions. Ms. Avella, you were actually first in line.
I actually don't have a question, I had a comment, but
Okay.
if that's not... Well, I just want to say that once a board is removed from the list of schools, it would be my understanding that our business relationship with that school is over. So we don't have an obligation at that point to, I think you said you didn't get a notification, or it's my understanding there's no responsibility to notify you. We don't, our relationship as a business is over. That doesn't preclude you from petitioning the board for reconsideration. But as far as a 6-month term, a 1-month term, 3-month term, there's no process. So the burden is on you to give us the information you would like us to review, and you are in fact on the agenda. And there was no information submitted. So you do have the right to petition, but that's certainly up to you, and that's your onus.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. There was a letter submitted on May 25th asking to be placed on the agenda,
And you were.
which would mean that we would also be notified, as is the common courtesy of the board staff, to notify the individuals that they will be considered on the agenda. That is all the program was looking for. They knew they had no true relationship, but the board staff always ask, if you would like to be placed on the agenda, please advise us. And in turn, the board should say, we are not going to reconsider it, of which they're always reconsidered. But it's just a common courtesy to say, we're not going to, as you presented, we have no further relationship with you, we're not going to consider it. Getting a note, a memo, an email, a flash by carrier pigeon is all that they were looking for so that they could mount a defense.
Thank you for that
Okay.
clarification.
Thank you.
Do other board members have questions for the representative or the NEC? I don't.
Thank
Mr. DeBronstein?
Oh, I was just leaning forward. I'll make a motion that we accept the recommendation to uphold the board's May 13, 2016 revocation of provisional approval of the Bay Area College of Nursing Daly City Vocational Nursing Program.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. That means there's a motion on the floor. At this time, is there further public comment about the motion on the floor? Okay. Any further board discussion? It has been moved and seconded. At this time, I'd like to take a roll call vote. Ms. Norton?
Yes.
Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Dr. Baste Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Endozo?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Mr. DeBronstein?
Yes.
Ms. Avella?
Yes.
Mr. Deerking?
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Motion passes. That leads us to item 18C2, Preferred College of Nursing Van Nuys Vocational Nursing Program. Request for reconsideration of revocation. Donna Johnson, Nursing Education Consultant. Ms. Johnson, we have your report, and we have reviewed it. Do board members have any questions regarding the report to Ms. Donna Johnson? Any questions for Ms. Johnson? Nope. It seems we have a representative from Preferred College of Nursing Van Nuys here with us. If you would like to, you can state your name and if you, and any comments you have for the board or your disagreement or agreement with the recommendation.
Thank you, Board. My name is Alina Lanver. I'm counsel for Preferred College of Nursing. If you can't hear me, let me know. I respectfully urge this board to reverse the decisions it made at the May 13th hearing. My client had only 9 days before the May 13th board meeting in which it learned that NEC Johnson was recommending that PCN's right to operate as a vocational college be revoked immediately. Along with the recommendation, NEC Johnson sent a copy of her report, which PCN has not had any opportunity to refute. My client, though it was certain that the recommendations were not warranted and was not provided any reasonable opportunity to rebut, refute, and provide evidence that the recommendation was unwarranted. All that my client was permitted to do was to appear at the May 13th hearing. They sent representatives. It's a public forum similar to today, hoping that this board would not revoke the provisional approval. The board also limited access to a mere 3 minutes. At the May 13th hearing, my client should have been provided an opportunity to actually present evidence to the board, which would have established the error of NEC Johnson's recommendation. PCN should have also been permitted to question NEC Johnson to establish the truthfulness of her report. My client should have been provided the opportunity to defend its position, present evidence, and to show that it had made good faith efforts to correct all deficiencies claimed to exist by the board. All we want to do is comply with the good faith hearing requirement of the California Business and Professions Code, Section 2526.1. Under Section C, the board may place any program on provisional approval when that program does not meet all the requirements as set forth in this chapter and in Section 2526. However, if the program has not met all the requirements at the end of the initial provisional approval period, provisional approval may be extended if the program demonstrates to the satisfaction of the board a good faith effort to correct all the deficiencies. Without a meaningful hearing and an opportunity for PCN to present its evidence showing good faith, this board is in violation of the Business and Professions Code. My client was allowed to, had it been allowed to demonstrate that it had acted in good faith, which would have been permitted if it was allowed to remain open and to acquire the 20 additional students it was seeking, it could have shown you that demonstration. And also, such a demonstration can only be accomplished by this board by setting a hearing and allowing PCN to present such evidence to you, showing that good faith. Not only that, the board is under a statutory duty under the BMP to permit my client an opportunity to show good faith before it took any action to revoke its provisional approval. The board should have also permitted PCN the opportunity to show that NEC Johnson's recommendations to close the school was discriminatory and inconsistent with other recommendations she's made in the past. From your own minutes from May 15, 2015 hearing, PCN was well within the parameter and scope of colleges that should have been without question recommended for approval by NEC Johnson, approved for additional students, and further extended a provisional approved vocational nursing facility. Please take judicial notice from your own hearing. Bay Area College of Nursing Palo Alto Vocational Nursing Program was in its 4th year of provisional approval. It had a 57% passage, and you guys permitted 10 evening class students. Not you guys, NEC Johnson did. In a second college, Intercoast College Fairfield Vocational Nursing Program, also placed on provisional approval since September 12, 2014, it had 21 violations. 6 months later, they were approved for 15 additional students. Their current student pass rate, 24%. So just on these 2 instances, we feel that it's either she's biased towards PCN or somehow the programs are discriminating across the board. How come some programs are allowed to have a 24% passage rate while PCN is in the 60 percentile and still is getting revoked while another one is getting additional students? So there can be no justifying the closure of PCN, when other colleges on provisional approval are given extensions of their provisional approvals and students to fill their classrooms. On May 13th, without providing PCN any fair hearing in which it could represent and defend itself, and without allowing any type of admissible evidence, this board revoked PCN's provisional approval and removed it from the list of approved schools. PCN has been in operation for 16 years. Only the last year and a half has it been on a provisional approval. All previous years, it was an approved college. I and other counsel in my office have reviewed the video of the May 13th hearing, as well as the notice of decision dispatched to PCN on May 16. There was no real admissible evidence presented to this board. There were no findings made by the board, let alone any finding based on any evidence that would support the board's decision to close down PCN. The board on May 13th was made aware of the fact that the students that were attending PCN believed it was a very good institution, that the students themselves did not want to leave. They did not want PCN to be closed. To my surprise, the plea was completely ignored, and one of the board members, Avella, at 3 hours 31 minutes, discounted all of the public forum comments as mere emotion. It was also very clear from the May 13th video that the board did not adopt any recommendations made by NEC Johnson, and it did not approve or accept NEC Johnson's report or its contents. NEC Johnson didn't even speak. This board, without evidence, no findings upon which any evidence could be based, moved to revoke the provisional approval, removed it from the board's list of approved vocational nursing schools. In fact, the vote on the motion to revoke was only passed by a single vote. PCN did seek reconsideration from this board. PCN was not even made aware that its reconsideration request had been placed on this board's agenda until August 16. The notice was dated August 1st, but was not received in our offices until August 16th, and it had a starch deadline of August 18 in which we can submit argument, a mere 2 days later. When we received the report, it was copy-paste from the previous report. Nothing had been added. When we had presented evidence that all of our deficiencies had been complete. We have completed every single deficiency that was complained of in the report has all been solved. Again, we have not been afforded an opportunity to contest, protest, or expose any inaccuracies in her report. We are seeking reconsideration so that this board can reverse its decisions that were wrongfully done on May 13th. Consider PCN's request for the 20 students it sought from the board by application. There was without doubt no evidence before this board, and there was certainly no evidence sufficient to support or justify the decisions or revocations and removals made on May 13. PCN also urges this court to reject the report and recommendations of NEC Johnson, which is discriminatory in connection with other approved schools, and we didn't have an opportunity in order to refute her position. With all due respect, I respect this board. This board, however, should not treat NEC Johnson's recommendations as the gospel. There has to be a better mechanism for us when we are facing revocation than this forum. There has to be a private forum, maybe made up of 3 members, in which we can defend ourselves, in which we can present argument, in which we can bring in evidence. At this point, I feel bad for the board. You're only seeing a one-sided view. You're only seeing the view of NEC Johnson, because we don't have an opportunity to present any evidence to the contrary. And that's why I think that some type of mechanism needs to be put into place where we can present evidence and defend ourselves rather than getting revoked.
Thank you. I do want to address some of your concerns that you brought up.
Yes.
And the one thing, I've said it before, it's not something new, I'll say it again. I just want to make it clear to everyone, council in front of us, the public, anyone watching, that just a reminder that each school is a complete individual, case-by-case basis. There's more than just pass rates that are considered. when we consider revocation or provisional or any sort of action against the school. So I know we've had that question a couple times up here. Now, I was trying to write down while you were talking, and I believe your assertion was that this board violated 2526.1C. Is that correct?
The code is BMP,
Yes.
which is the Business and Professions Code, 2526.1, Section C.
Okay.
So just to provide a little help, that's actually the California Code of Regulations, so this is actually in your regs.
So once there's been a legal assertion made that there was some violation of the California Code of Regulations, I like to also get a legal answer. So we have legal counsel. Do you have I think you have that in front of you?
Yeah, I'm not clear what the question is.
Okay. Ma'am, could you just please clarify what...
You're saying there's a violation of,
what violation you're asserting?
Under the BMP 2526.1, Section C, the board may place any program on provisional approval when that program does not meet all the requirements as set forth in this chapter and in Section 2526. If the program has not met all the requirements at the end of the initial provisional approval period, provisional approval may be extended if the program demonstrates to the satisfaction of the board a good faith effort to correct all deficiencies. My position is we want to show that we have made good faith efforts so that we can get an extension of the provisional approval. But if we don't have a form in which to show the good faith efforts and we can't display that, then that would be a violation of the code.
you stated the regulation accurately. If you can provide to the satisfaction of the board a good faith effort to correct deficiencies, provisional approval may be extended. I think the fact that you're on the agenda today is an opportunity to do that. I mean, to add to that, the board also, a program's failure to correct delineated areas of noncompliance is cause for revocation of provisional approval. So as it was in May, it's up to the board to determine if, which way they see that.
And then I know you're saying something about a hearing.
Well, let me respond to
Yes,
Ms. Bond.
Yes.
So our good faith efforts, which we had demonstrated in May 13th, and I'm going to reiterate here, is that PCN notified the Accrediting Bureau of Health Education Schools, ABHES, of its intentions to make PCN a credible and competent educational facility. The school was supported by Assemblyman Adnan Nazarian, who was excited about the school and the progress that it had done and the investment in the community. Since April 2015, investors invested thousands of dollars in PCN's educational reestablishment, hundreds of hours of hands-on time spent personally working with staff and agents of PCN to turn it into an effective and high-performing educational institution. The investors worked to resolve a huge host of issues in the betterment of PCN, paying and negotiating rent at a prior PCN location, paying all past due late fees to PCN's accrediting agencies, ABHES, Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education, purchasing workers' comp and general liability insurance, retaining a consultant to correct all the uncorrected violation issues involving ABHES and the BVNPT, and to complete all annual reports due to the different regulatory agencies who accredited PCN, purchasing all supplies and skills lab equipment that NEC Donna Johnson recommended in her unannounced inspections of PCN. They purchased a new copy machine, reconnected phone service, signed a contract for a new internet provider, bought a software called ATI, employed additional staff. They have a 5-to-1 ratio. For every student, they have 5 staff members to support them, including post-educational support for finding employment. They have retained a website developer to revise the PCN website. They secured letters of intent from vocational nursing employers who are committed to employing PCN students after graduation and certification. They also increased the hours of current staff to support student and school objectives and employed additional staff specifically in the area of student services and career services for job placement assistance for PCN graduates. And finally, they resolved all the issues that were complained of in every single NEC report.
And then you mentioned about a hearing, and I just want to make sure we're understanding each other because I don't know of any hearing mechanism that's in place as you're describing it. The process right now, the process and procedure is that when schools are put up for revocation or any action that they come before this board and the board has the final decision. Is there a specific hearing you were referencing, or you're saying you would like to see a new mechanism put in place?
I don't know if the protocol is a good one. I question it. And I think it's mostly because it's a disservice to you. I feel that the board only gets a one-sided perspective. Or there's a very limited time for the defendant, let's say us in this case, for us to defend ourselves in our case. So NEC Johnson, she can be the smartest NEC in the world, but if she makes certain assertions and a defendant doesn't have an opportunity to defend itself in any type of form other than a public forum in front of 100 other schools, which is kind of embarrassing, it would be best to maybe create some type of a private mediation type of environment where one can defend itself in a private, maybe there's 3 board members that are in charge of that type of a forum, where NEC Johnson can present her assertions, the school can defend itself, and then maybe 3 board members vote on some type of a revocation or not. To be in a public forum, to express all your concerns, to air out your dirty laundry, for me, it's a little bit, because I'm involved in the court system, it's a strange mechanism. So I would think that there could be maybe in the future, there can be thoughts of creating a new protocol for defending oneself other than in a public forum.
Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. I'd like at this time to take questions from board members.
Yes, please.
Board members have any questions for council in front of us, representing Preferred College? I don't see any. Dr. Baste-Martinez? No? Okay. There are no questions at this time.
I'd like to also call to the stand Ms. Estrada, who is our program director.
Ms. Estrada, would you like to introduce yourself for the record?
Thank you. I just have a few comments because, she's already said a lot of things that I meant to address. But one of the things is that we do need more help. As she stated, NEC Johnson did not support us to the level that we needed. Our calls and emails and ultimate correspondence were left ignored or delayed. We were asked to provide a new curriculum, and we did it on time with a great deal of expense and time from our staff. And we did not receive one comment or feedback or guidance from that submission. The very next thing that happened was the May board meeting where we were informed that we were going to be immediately revoked. To me, that period of time would have been a good time for us to have some guidance, some assistance, and some direction as to where we're going. We don't need to be surprised several days before the board meeting, or I think it was a week, that we were going to be revoked. So I totally agree with the comments previously that we need to have a venue or a procedure in which a school that's revoked can come to the board or to the designated committee or council and really examine this issue because I'm an experienced director. I've worked with several colleges. I've been successful. I had 5 months before this issue came up. And we took away the agenda item in February, if you remember, because we wanted to meet and address every violation, which we feel we did. We never were told that we didn't. So we're assuming that what we did was the correct process. But yet, we get a huge shock at the board meeting for an immediate, not even a delayed, it was an immediate revocation. We request a fresh look. We heard some good things this morning about the new NECs. We hope that we would, progress further with a fresh look. We deserve to have another chance. And this program has gotten so much support from the investors and the staff and the faculty. With the amount of brain power that we've got on the board and the people in this room, we should be able to come up with a more systematic process to address these kinds of serious decisions that the board has to make and not have an immediate revocation. You know, as she said, we've been around for 16 years and been successful. And then the last year and a half, there were some changes in our school. So when we were making those changes, we followed every single guideline that we were given, and yet we were disappointed. So certainly there's a more fair policy in regards to any decision that affects the closure of a school. It shouldn't be based on a 5-4 vote. It should at least be 2/3 vote or something else that we can come up with together that can make more sense and still make sure that the public is protected. So we asked, and we deserve, another chance and strongly request that the school be reconsidered and revocation removed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to see if board members have any questions or comments for either of our representatives from the school.
No, just one point of personal privilege. I would prefer if individual staff was not, individual staff was not named unless it's germane to the discussion.
Thank you.
Can we, excuse me,
Yes.
can we seek council advice?
Yes.
Since we've had council present speaking on behalf of an institution, what is the advice to the board here in responding to counsel for an institution?
Well, they're here today asking you if you are able to, or if you would like to reconsider the revocation that you put into place in May. As was referred before, there's no actual procedure for this, so it's something of a courtesy. If that's something you want to do, then the question becomes whether there's grounds for it. So it gets you right back to where you were in May, which is to determine, you know, if there's if it shows to the board's satisfaction that there's a good faith effort to correct all deficiencies, and of course that's discretionary. That's determining if it's meeting your meeting that to your satisfaction. Otherwise, you know, in terms of consumer protection, of course, failure to correct the delineated areas is cause for revocation. So, you know, to sum it up, you're in kind of a very discretionary place. You're being asked. The first request is even whether you would like to reconsider the revocation, and then the second step that would follow to that is whether or not you would like to change the revocation at all.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, council, I can respond to council.
Absolutely, you can, much
Thank
like
you.
Yeah, and
Just want to make sure it's clear. In all venues, it's different.
Oh, okay.
Want to make sure it's clear.
Did you have a question?
Not at the moment, but I want to make sure it's clear.
Thank you. Mr. DeBrownstein?
I would say at this point to move this along, I'll make the motion in line with the recommendation that we uphold the board's May 13th, 2016 revocation of approval of Preferred College of Nursing Van Nuys Vocational Nursing Program, and that will help us gear our discussion directly towards the motion before us.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Thank you, seconded by Mr. Durkin. So there's a motion on the floor now. Any public comment on the motion?
Your motion, I didn't underhear you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well. You wanted to uphold the NEC's recommendation, is that the motion, or to?
The motion was to uphold the board's May 13th, 2016 decision.
Yeah. So I'm definitely against that. My public comment is the same that I have reiterated, is I'm against that. I feel like we've made good faith strides. We weren't able in May, or it wasn't responded to or taken to heart all of the strides that the school had made. We have done a good faith effort, and under the law, under BMP code, we can get an extension of the provisional approval if we show a good faith effort and everything that was complained of as a violation has been corrected. So I don't even see the reason for the revocation since all issues have been corrected. Everything that was complained of that was an alleged violation has been corrected. So if we can have another representative with fresh eyes to come see the corrections, then we would like an extension for this period of time of the provisional approval so that a new NEC with fresh eyes can come and see that all the violations have been corrected. And the last report only had 3 violations. It went down from 7 to 3. Now there are 0 violations. So I'm not sure why the school continues to be revoked if there are 0 violations. That's why we request the fresh eyes. You have new staff. That would be a wonderful opportunity for a new NEC to come in, take a look at NEC Johnson's report. Maybe she'll concur. Maybe she'll refute. At least we should have that opportunity. And I think we have shown a good faith effort.
Thank you. I know we have some more public comment. You guys can't see it, but there's people sort of coming up in the back. I want to see if board members have any questions for these representatives before we take further public comment. Mr. Vertito and then Ms. Norton.
Thank you. Counselor, has your school brought up the eight quarters of failure to passing?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The counselor states that all the errors have been corrected. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 quarters of failure where your school is below state averages. Have they all been brought up to state minimums?
I
Since she states all-
believe that one of the reports that the NEC has brought about in the last part of 2015 was that we were improving, that we were slowly going up, and that is why she approved the 10 students to come in January.
No, the question...
So it wasn't consecutive. Those eight failing periods were before I came on board.
I understand that. The question stated by the counselor is that all violations have been corrected. So have the past 10 or so quarters been all brought up to state passing
Yeah.
levels?
Yes.
They have.
She only had 3 issues, and those last 3 issues were corrected.
So I'm just repeating that there were only 3 violations in their last report, and that was not one of them.
I believe.
Bring that up in the last report.
Well, I'm asking now. You just stated, counselor, that all your violations have been corrected. One of them was school was below the state level, state average.
We haven't gotten a report on the last one, the last quarter.
So the answer is no.
Yeah.
No. The last violations that NEC Johnson complained of was 3 violations, and those 3 violations, so we would just systematically improve each violation. So we started out with 12 violations was originally 2 years ago. That was improved to 7 violations was noted. The 7 violations, she took it down to 3 violations. The 3 violations were last
Well, one of the key
improved.
I'm not going to argue it. Just want to know yes or no.
I think we can...
Let me explain to her the question. Your school improved, your passage rates have to be at a certain level. So in the last quarter, are you still...
Can I
waiting
make
for
a
those to be
suggestion?
reported? We don't have the last report. We expect them all to be passing.
So the answer is no.
Okay, because we haven't received the report, and also, you stated, when I started saying that it was discriminatory against other schools, you stated that those are not the only factors, that passage rates
You're
are not the
changing-
only factor.
I just
Wait.
asked-
Time out.
I have a suggestion. Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, I think it's what I was going to suggest. Go ahead.
So it's very hard to evaluate, obviously, verbal arguments when we haven't received any information, and obviously we can't really ask our NECs to do that. Am I wrong in saying that, well, let me step back. So you are on the agenda to present your case, but it sounds like you don't think that you got adequate notice. Regardless of that, adequate notice to prepare. So regardless of that, they have the opportunity to ask us to be put on the next board meeting's agenda, where you can have the opportunity to put together a comprehensive, written, new data, whatever you want to do, so we can evaluate it, I guess, in a more effective way, rather than going round and round. I mean, that's a suggestion.
Because,
So-
Madam President.
Let me take, I'm sorry, Mr. Durkin, but Ms. Norton had has been standing in line. Let me take hers first, and then I'll take yours. Ms. Norton.
I remember when you came before us in May. I was opposed to the revocation in May.
Yes.
I remain opposed to the revocation today. I don't know what we need to do to move on from this, but it certainly seems that at this time, there is a motion on the table that has been seconded. We're in public comment related to the motion.
Yes.
I would suggest that we have more comment related to the motion, and then we vote on the motion.
Yes.
Well, but we can actually approve this motion, but they can still come back. They can still come back. They have that right.
Yes. So even if what Ms. Avella's and Dr. Brown is nodding her head, even if the motion on the table currently is passed, you still could come back to a later meeting and send materials and make a presentation. So, am I getting that correct? Yes. Mr. Durkin?
Yes, it just seems, if I can summarize the arguments, number one, this institution did not have notice and an opportunity to be heard. And two, there was a suggestion of disparate or discriminatory treatment. And I don't think that's supported by the record. However, I'm ready to go with the motion.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Yes, we have, so we're currently responding to your public comment, which was in response to the motion. We do have more public comment that is out there. So I would like to bring, no one is standing anymore. Those of you who are standing for public comment, if you would like to approach, if it's helpful to introduce yourself, for the record, if you wish to.
I'll be within my 3-minute time, hopefully. I'm going to try. Well, I think that as a person who's been before this board with a 17% pass rate for a previous college that I worked for, and my experience with the NEC team, as legal counsel shared their experience, first, I think, and foremost, I have to just frankly say, I'm a little appalled that the school is blaming NEC Johnson and the NEC team. I heard the school say a whole buffet of actions that they took in order to overcome the provisional status. They named investors, they named assembly people, and I like to sit with this assemblyman. They named everybody under the sun, but the one person that they forgot to name was the students. What did you do for the students? You put all this money into fax machines, copier machines. What did you do for the students? What money went towards these students to get them to get licensed to what they pay tens of thousands of dollars in tuition fees for? That's the consumer student that Mr. Vertito was talking about protecting. And that's what the board needs to do more of. The fact that we're going to do scurrilous accusations against the NECs about a lack of due process. Well, I had a lack of due process. I didn't have a lack of due process. Our school got taken to the woodshed for taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from consumer students and not performing the actions we were supposed to do, and that's pass the NCLEX, get a rate within 10% of the state average, and get these people licensed and placed. Not heard one thing about what we did for the students. 40 quarters to perspective to you is what you need to pay into Social Security so you're able to collect it when you retire. 40 quarters is a long time. You made the right choice. and until there's something that borders lines, some fantasy story about how wonderful we've done for ourselves and our students, I think the board should stay with their decision.
Thank you.
I also think, just in closing,
Okay.
I also think that I'd like to see exactly what this money has been put towards in the provisional time of the last 2 years towards these students. Not to pick apart and have scurrilous accusations against the NECs and their team. It's just ridiculous to have people blame somebody else besides themselves. I did not hear, we're responsible for the place we're in, and this is what we've done. Not what we're going to do, but this is what we've done to overcome it. And obviously, after 44 quarters, it's time to give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. I know we have some more public comment.
I have to reply to him. I don't get to reply to him?
I'd like to take, hold on. Let me, relax. Okay. What I'm suggesting is that we take the rest of the public comment and then give you a chance to respond. I'm not trying to take away your right. I'm just thinking there may be more. Yes.
Again, thank you. I'm Janetta Garcia. The point is clear, but not as clear as rain. And Member Avila stated, well, we can take the decision, move the motion, accept and adopt it, and they can come back. But the prior program has the same issue. But her statement was, we have no relationship with them. We don't have to do anything with them at that point. We must be consistent in our deliberations, in our protection. And if I've misunderstood, there was no suggestion that BACN come back next time. That's why I put forward the appeal of 6 months. It takes almost 3 months to get to this point when you have the revocation. If it can be brought 3 months later, that's a combined 6 months. That's what we're saying the board member is suggesting, perhaps. But if the board can't come to a definitive decision because it is as confused as the programs are, this is not easy for anyone, then you lean on your legislative body. You ask your board to seek counsel with legislative support that can put in sections, that can codify the reasons when someone is revoked or reconsideration. You lean on that policy body that is bigger than all of you. However, I am gracious that you're here. But you lean on the body that ultimately is responsible to the entire state and the nation. You can always do it yourself, but sometimes you don't get the cobwebs out. Make the body that's responsible, the state of California, let the legislators do that for you. Or come to a consensus, as Member Avila, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, has so graciously said, well, if we uphold something now, we can bring back something later. We're going to maybe, perhaps, give them an opportunity to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to respond. I think my comments were mischaracterized. It is true that, as far as I understand, that when a school's approval is revoked, our day-to-day business relationship is over, okay? We don't have any further business. That does not preclude their right or your right to petition the board to be reconsidered. So those aren't mutually exclusive terms. Okay?
No, but your point was
so
clear.
you have the right. You decided to close your school. You have the right to repetition as well. So
No, I agree with you.
that was just not a comment that came up in that.
Yeah.
I will say that I am only acknowledging that they have the right to come back and say, I did not say my vote would be different. I absolutely did not hear evidence to suggest that I would reconsider. However, they have the opportunity, to come back if they like.
Right. No, I don't think anyone has heard anyone's vote at this time. It was just putting the numbers together to make the 6 months of an appeal.
Exactly.
Where the attorney would have come forward with even a bigger package, the package that's suggested perhaps on the next agenda, the opportunity to gain and gather information as you have on there. And when you're stuck in the middle and you can't get out of the box, you defer to the next level up.
Okay.
And I'm glad we clarified.
Thank you.
I'm glad we clarified that.
I'd like to also say something else to sort of echo Mr. Deerking's comment, is that, clearly, these decisions are made not by one person. They are made and reviewed by board staff. They are reviewed by Cheryl Anderson. They are reviewed by Kamika Brown, and they are fully vetted, I believe, conscientiously by this board. So I do take exception to the constant references to an individual, because this is the board's decision. And we need to, if we have a criticism, express it to the board.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for that.
Here, here.
Any further public comment before we let you respond to the previous public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone come forward. Council, would you like to have a chance to respond?
Alina Landver again for PCN. I just wanted to make a quick comment to respond to Mr., I didn't catch his name, I'm sorry. I think it's completely false that we don't care about the students and that I didn't mention the students, and the students were never discussed, and maybe he was sleeping at the time, I'm not sure. But I would like to reiterate that we employed additional staff specifically in the area of student services and career services for job placement assistance for the PCN graduates. We increased hours for current staff to support student and school objectives. We secured letters of intent from vocational nursing employers who are committed to employing PCN students after graduation and certification, purchased supplies and skill lab equipment for those students. We care about the students. We have Ms. Estrada for the students. If not for the students, we could invest in a body shop and make money, but this is for the betterment of the community, betterment of the students. That's what PCN has been doing for the last 16 years. So it's obviously for the students. And I don't mean to single anybody out. I know the board works collectively, and I appreciate the nays, and I appreciate the pros that were for us last time during the vote. I just think that we didn't have an opportunity to show a good faith effort, or it wasn't acknowledged when we did do it back in May. And I think we were given great strides, and that we should have gotten at least an extension of the provisional approval. I'm not singling out NEC Johnson, except for the fact that she was the only NEC on our case. It would be great to get a fresh look at our program and all the corrections that we've made. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the students.
To this,
I just have a comment.
okay. I believe we have one more public comment. I'd like to take that first, so we can. Hi.
Carrie Wybrew from Concord. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
I just wanted to real quick, Mr. Vertito, on the comment you made, and I wanted to clarify, because I'm not sure they understood about what it meant when you're saying that you're in compliance and you're meeting the standards. Like I think you were trying to say is that you are not in full compliance if you aren't meeting that passing standard. There's a lot of other things they look at, but, so you can't say that you're all in compliance. if
Ma'am, you have to
don't-
direct your comments to me.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, they couldn't say that they're all in compliance with everything if the pass rate is still underneath what the passing standard is for the state under regulatory.
Thank you.
So that. And also to the process of how a school comes before the full board, well, that's very common in every state for exactly the situations, and I think it's very helpful for all schools when we come and we see what are the expectations, and how are individual circumstances held. And so I think that's a process that should continue to come up before the board, and that we would want that because you want there to be a look at that with that individual consideration. So
Thank you. Thank you. Before we go to Dr. Baste Martinez, I just want to finish up with our public comment. Do we have any further? Okay. So at this time, then, I'm going to, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Noreen Marks. I'm a supervising attorney with the Department of Consumer Affairs. I just want to clarify what I think the motion is and what the process is, and clarify for the board that if there is were to be a motion for reconsideration, I think there is another motion on the table, but if there were, that I think it needs to be made by the person who's on the prevailing party for the motion in May. And then want to just let the board know that if that were the case, if there were a motion to reconsider, then the board could reconsider that at a future meeting and would not be doing that now.
Thank you. The current motion is to uphold the May decision. Okay, I do not see any more public comments, so I'm going to close public comment at this time on, Dr. Bastien-Martinez.
Thank you. As I read the report and the information we have before us, the revocation was based on the information we had at that time. It's never pleasant to get bad news. It's really difficult, especially when one really loves their institution and cares about what they do. That said, as more information comes forth, and particularly in the manner in which it occurred, one, particularly as a board member, I ask myself the question, at what point do the folks who run the institution, do the investors who support the institution get behind the institution and put lots of whatever it takes in to make changes? What's the point at which they have received so many lists of concerns or so many phone calls or so many reviews questioning what is that right point? And there is no one answer for that. The number of concerns, and based on what we were just told, all that was purchased and done and changed with what appears to be within minutes or days, it gives one pause. Why was that not happening earlier? Why did it take the threat of revocation to make it happen what seemingly appears to be overnight?
Thank you.
And that's rhetorical. I do not expect an answer.
Okay, thank you. Any further board discussion on this item? Okay, there's a motion on the floor. The motion is to uphold the May 13th, 2016 revocation of approval at Preferred College.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Let me clarify what that means exactly, because as noted earlier, the agenda has noted that it's for the request for reconsideration. And by the motion here of upholding the revocation, that effectively is denying the request for reconsideration. So I just want to clarify that this is effectively the same thing, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page that in terms of the request made, the request for reconsideration, this motion, and correct me if I'm wrong as the maker of the motion, but this motion effectively would deny that request.
Thank you. I see what you're saying with the wording. Okay, there's been a motion. It's been seconded. We've had public comment. We've had board discussion. At this time, I'd like to take a roll call vote on the motion on the table, starting with Ms. Norton.
Now, I just want to be clear.
Okay. Yes, please.
Because the motion is to uphold the decision to revoke.
Yes.
But the agenda says that what's on the agenda is to grant or deny them an appeal. So what particularly are we voting on right now?
Sure. And legal counsel said it essentially means the same thing, but let me go back to Mr.
The vote would be
Brownstein.
different.
It says the agenda specifically says consideration of request for reconsideration of the May 13th action. By moving to uphold the May 13th action, you're saying that would be a denial of the request to reconsider the May 13th action.
Which would require a different kind of vote.
So would Mr. Brownstein like to amend his motion?
As the maker of the motion, it was my feeling and belief that we were taking a report, taking argument or presentations, and that gave me enough information to be comfortable making the motion that I made, that I believe has the Same intent as legal counsel presented.
Legal counsel, would you like Mr. DeBronstein to reword his motion to the words, the language in the agenda?
I don't believe that's necessary as long as the seconder of the motion also understands it to be what he was saying.
Okay.
I think that's.
second it?
Yes.
Is that, yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Ms. Norton?
So the motion then is to uphold the decision to revoke.
Yes.
So we're ready to take a vote?
Huh?
So we're going to just take that vote?
The motion is to uphold the May 13th decision, which then denies the request for reconsideration.
I understand. So we're ready now?
Yeah, we're voting.
Opposed? Opposed?
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Norton. Mr. Vertito?
4.
Ms. Mendoza? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Bastin. I'm sorry. Dr. Bastin Martinez. Dr. Bastin Martinez?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Mendoza?
Oppose?
Vice President Moreno?
Oppose.
I'm a yes. Mr. DeBronstein?
Yes.
Ms. Avella?
Yes.
Mr. Deerking?
Yes.
That gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 to 3. Motion passes. Thank you. That moves us to agenda item 18D. And actually, 18D1 is Bay Area College of Nursing Daily City Vocational Nursing Program. And or Palo Alto, I'm sorry. I misspoke, Palo Alto. And I just wanted to give some updated information. This is an FYI, actually, agenda item. We need no vote. Bay Area College of Nursing Palo Alto has requested a voluntary closure. And so there's no need to vote on this agenda item. This can be an informational-only item unless board members have an objection. Okay? Seeing none, that brings us to the end of our school reports. And actually, at this time, is he here? At this time, and before we go back to revisit the Education Committee and delegating authority, at this time, I want to take a moment to make a special presentation. And as some of you may know, we have 2 board members who are currently serving their grace period.
Madam President, he's out of the room.
Oh, we'll start with Todd.
Start with Todd.
So we have Todd DeBronstein, who has been on the board since 2005. And Mr. John Vertito has also been on the board since 2005. They're currently serving their grace period, which means they're here until they are replaced, no more than a year. So they are both here today. I am not sure if they will be here in November. So I wanted to take this time to present some special things to them and say a word of thanks to them and have them also offer their thoughts. So if the audience would permit me to. I have a handheld mic here, so I'm going to turn it on. Yeah, we're just waiting to see if the handheld mic will turn on. Just got it. It's like suspense. Can you hear me now? Okay, so Todd, if you would please stand up. What I have for you here is a plaque of appreciation, an appreciation award presented to Todd DeBronstein in recognition of your outstanding achievements and dedicated service to the California State Board of Vocational Nursing and Psych Techs, 2005 to 2016. I also have I also have a certificate of recognition resolution from Assemblyman Christopher Holden's office, and it outlines your duties and your service to the board, and an appreciation of your service. So this is also for you. And then I wanted to take this time to just say a few words. I've only been on the board since 2013. Todd has been here since 2005. He's the other Psych Tech member on the board. I appreciate everything you've done for this board since 2005. I appreciate your dedication, your leadership. You've been president, you've been vice president, you've been also the other PT member, and it's outstanding. The dedication you've shown is outstanding, and you've shown a true commitment both to the board, to the profession, to the public, and all the stakeholders. So I just wanted to say thank you and present you with this small token of appreciation. And I would like to give you the opportunity to say a few words.
Grateful, very grateful. And I want to thank my wife before I forget, because she's gone through all of this with me. But I recall a time when, and some of you may know, Ann Schumann was a nursing education consultant, full-time with the board for a very long time. And I dragged her down to the front to do a similar presentation. And she said, Todd, if you ever do that again, I will get back at you. So I'm wondering if this is her way of getting back at me. So Ann, thank you for all of your years of service. I know she's still with the board as a retired annuitant. But yes, it's huge public service. These decisions we make up here are tough. Sometimes we lose sleep over them. It's up late at night. They are not easy decisions. We take them very seriously. It is a lot of hard work to be a board member up here, yet every time I see the students come before us, what do I got to do to get up there? What do I got to do to be a board member? You know, it's not easy. I appreciate the respect I've earned from my fellow board members. It has been a long time, 11 years. I don't know many people that stay in one position for 11 years, but thank you. It has been great, and I'm happy to serve as long as, you know, as possible, as the governor sees fit. If there's another board or commission in the future, you know, we'll see. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. At this time, we would present Mr. Vertito's awards. I noticed Mr. Vertito is not in the room. So we'll actually move on to the next agenda item, because I don't see him coming back at this moment. So Jay's here helping us. We'll actually move on because I don't want to slow us down anymore. The next agenda item we have is what I mentioned earlier. So earlier, I mentioned that we were going to hear all the schools, and then we were going to come back to our education committee and talk some more about their role, their function, their authority, and we had some questions earlier that I did ask to be delayed until this time. So we will revisit this agenda item right now, Education Committee, and that's Dr. Bastey Martinez. I know that you are here, your other half is not. I would like to start with the questions previously on the table. I believe they were from Ms. Avella and Ms. Norton, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember what it was.
Ms. Norton, here's ready. We can take up your question now if you'd like to repeat it.
I don't remember what it was. It's been a long day. But I guess the question that comes to mind immediately is, well, I can support the need for an education committee, and it might be a more effective way to do things. My question would be, the committee would meet monthly, but the decisions that are made would still be made by the full board, which will still meet quarterly. So how would that work? And then how would we keep up with the schools, and how would the schools be notified that they have to go meet with the committee and not meet with the full board? So basically, I think it's just some housekeeping and some logistical questions that I have. And that's it for now.
Thank you. I'm trying to determine who would be the best person to address the roles and the logistic questions that you brought up. Dr. Brown, do you feel comfortable?
Sure, and I first want to thank you guys. I know this was a little bit bumpy as new things as you turn to iron them out, so I appreciate your patience on this. We are somewhat of a victim of our own success. Because we now will have 6 NECs, we will have additional review of schools, which then will increase our review and potentially will increase the need for provisional. I, again, don't believe that because we have all of these schools that are doing excellent. But should that be the case, what we will do will be very similar to the way that we notify schools of their need to come here. And that happens where the NECs and the SNEC actually sends them both an email as well as a fax notification. And then that goes out and they are sent that out ahead of time. And then a confirmation fax is then received back from the school saying that, yes, I did receive this and I know to come. They will then know to come to the education committee. Now that we're starting to build up steam and they know that the education committee is not perfunctory or optional, and that we're actually going to be doing some work, should you guys agree, then the schools will know to come. From that, you guys will then also, through correspondence will know which schools will actually be heard during that time. It's very similar to what is happening with BRN, where that blast goes out from Christine Lawley's office of what is being met, what's the agenda that's happening in the education committee, and it goes out through all DCA wide. And so that actually will continue to happen. So there's a multiple different ways. And it'll also be on our website. And so then there's multiple ways that notification will occur. You guys will then receive both the agenda beforehand of what schools will happen, and then subsequently the meeting and minutes following that. The reason for this is that there is an alternative. Let me say that there is an alternative that we can have these potential initial provisionals, which go by a lot quicker, and the education committee make their recommendation. Or there's always the alternative of we do what the Board of Registered Nursing does, which is that they meet, I think, either every month or every other month, or we expand to 3 days. But eventually, we're going to our agendas are becoming so long that we are now expanding to beyond our 8-hour and our 10-hour days that you guys are saying, because you guys didn't get done until 7, so we have to do something. And so this was just a consideration of how can I actually lighten up some of your load, right? But there are other alternatives if you don't feel like this one works, but this one is to try to somehow lighten some of the load that goes before the board.
And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, it was my understanding, we didn't have a lot of discussion about this previously because of the Open Meeting Act, is that the Education Committee, Dr. Bastien Martinez and Mr. Vertito, it would sort of be a first pass at the schools, so they would see them, consider all the information, consider the NEC's report, consider everything, and just, it's more information for us to have a recommendation from our board members, and maybe that would help move the process, help just give us more information and utilize the Education Committee. That was my understanding of the intent. Ms. Avella?
Well, I just have some concerns about that because I understand the goal to streamline, but in execution, I'm not sure that's what happened. So I appreciate the effort, but firstly, I want to make sure we have the most recent information. So if we have to back this up, that's a significant concern. I think that could really change our decisions. I also want the NECs to feel like, they're being supported and don't have to do extra work as well. So it almost seems like we're putting in an interim step. My goal is I want to get the freshest information in the clearest, concise fashion that I can to make a decision. If there's a way to do both and support the NECs and not add to their workload, I'm happy to consider it. But I felt like this morning I felt like it was I was confused, and we we have to be careful because it might affect our decisions, so.
I think you offered some great feedback that we will make sure of. There's one thing that, as we have 2 additional roles that we're expanding that are going to meet your needs, should you guys consider that? And that's the clerical role that goes into the NEC. That's the AGP MST role, and that role is the role that will be updating the files, and that's the piece that was missing today, right? When you guys said, well, wait, this report is dated June. It's almost September. Can I get the? And so that's the additional piece that won't be passed on to the NEC, but that will be passed on to that clerical person to update that part of the report, so to ensure that if there's new data that needs to be added, and then will that actually, in fact, change the NEC's recommendation, and then also then alert the Education Committee should they need to. So you're absolutely right, and I think that part is critical, right? And so I think that's the linchpin that we did not, again, getting all of the bugs out, did not do that. But again, I want to make sure that you do have 3 options to you. You can direct this to the Education Committee and see if this is something that works. You can consider expanding to 3 days, or you can consider meeting more regularly than quarterly.
So, would it be only the schools that are being placed on provisional for the first time that go through the Education Committee?
Yes.
It would, okay, so it's only that. The Education Committee will meet monthly. And then-
Dr. Baste Martinez, is that the proposal, yes?
We had understood monthly would be, but as needed.
Okay.
But not more frequently than once a month.
I see. That's correct.
But then all of the decisions that they make will come before the full board at the
Yes.
next board meeting.
And they are recommendations, they're not a decision.
Understood. The recommendations of the committee will come before this board. So again, we're back to, we will then have the recommendation of the committee.
Yes.
And we will also have the recommendation of the NECs.
Correct.
Doesn't that double the workload? Because then we will have to read and ascertain 2 different people's reports.
You're correct. It would be more reading for you guys. One thing is the schools, if they did not have the first pass through the Education Committee, they would be waiting until the full board meeting anyways. So there's no delay to the schools because they would have had to wait to the full board meeting anyhow. It's a chance for those school concerns to be heard sooner and to be seen through the Education Committee. And then, yes, every single thing done by the Education Committee will still come before the full board. We are, with the increased NECs and also some proposals that we're going to be talking about later, we anticipate even more schools coming before us on our agenda at every meeting. So this was an attempt to, put something out there since we had an Education Committee and see if that would help just provide more information. And we have a recommendation already from board members. Doesn't mean that we have to accept it. All board members would, of course, still be able to ask questions and make their own vote. But yes, our agendas are not going to be getting smaller anytime soon. They're going to be getting larger.
So once the school is on there for the first time, it's only one time they pass through the Education Committee.
I'm sorry.
It's only one time that the schools will pass through the Education Committee.
Yes.
Other than that, they'll be on the regular board meeting.
Initial provisional.
Right.
All right, thank you.
So it's not for people that are already on provisional and are just requesting to admit students. It's not that. It's only the initial provisional provisional approval, because we found that those cases were actually taking the longest. Schools that were not on provisional before and were getting first their initial provisional. So we found those were taking the longest. So this was just an effort to use our committee, and then we took it to the full board. So now we're here at the full board. Doesn't mean we have to delegate that authority to the Education Committee. We'll vote on that. We'll vote on what duties and authority we want them to have. But that's why we're here. It was a little confusing this morning, I'll admit. We
were surprised.
Yep, it was surprising to me too. So yes, it would be reading 2 reports then. Vice President Moreno.
in light of what we were reading earlier with the two reports, if that is the direction that the board takes, I think it would be helpful, and I'm not one to want to create more work, but if there could be a summary sheet that then itemized or showed what would then be the difference between the two reports instead of having to, go back and forth. I think that would be helpful.
Actually, I agree with you. That would have been very helpful to me this morning. Just because I was flipping back and forth saying, what does one recommend, what does the NEC recommend? So I see Dr. Brown nodding her head that could be something that was included by staff. Ms. Avella.
Can I ask something? Can I ask the NECs?
Sure.
What would be your recommendation as to how we should approach this education committee and the report? What would be helpful to you? I mean, what I'd like to hear from you as well. I don't know who, Cheryl, can you speak to that? I mean, and I guess I'll be more specific. I mean, what is the best way for us to evaluate the information? What's the best way for you to prepare the information and to streamline the process so that our resource-constrained staff can prioritize what they need to do?
The Education Division can function very well with an Education Committee. We prepare one report.
I'm sorry, did you say can or can't?
Can.
Okay.
If we can prepare a document, if what you'd like are your minutes to show the difference in the two reports. In other words, the recommendation of a consultant versus the decision or the recommendation that was adopted by the committee, we can certainly do that. But if you also look at the way the committee report is prepared, you do have the comments from the two committee members, the board members who served on the committee, so that you really do see what led to their decision. We are certainly willing to amend it. If you'd like us to change the dates on the reports that are attached from the NECs, that's certainly doable. The reports that you have now are dated the very same way they went to the committee, and that's why your dates look different.
But that's the date. I mean, I want it to be accurate.
But it's a change in date, so that's not a big difference, and we can do that.
Okay, can I ask, but how are we going to deal with the time lag that happens between when the NECs have to prepare the information for the committee and what may happen after that? The freshness of the data. How do we deal with that?
That's the clerical piece. And so that would be the clerical piece that then when they're coming before, because then we do that final check to make sure, because we get the drawdown from Pearson View when we get the data. And so then that's where we add in that additional quarter. So like what happened today with that school that actually didn't have any additional reporting, we should have just put in a 0 for you. So then that you could have reflected that and you could have seen that. So we can do that additional step, but that doesn't actually pass through to the NEC. That's just simply an AGPA that would put that in. And so then we can do that. Okay. And then we'll just loop back in with the committees if there's anybody that has a significant change, right?
Okay.
Go ahead.
But isn't that an additional step? I mean, we're talking about creating a summary of the two bodies' reports. We're talking about pulling data after the fact, after the report's already been created. I mean, I'm just trying to challenge here. Are we streamlining or are we creating more work?
So I think your point is valid. There's two opportunities. I don't actually have an opinion, right? My thoughts are this: schools are delaying because we're going to have more staff. We're going to have more schools waiting to be seen, and so I'm more concerned about that. So that information will potentially be aging. The other, like I said, there's other opportunities, elongating or more frequency in what we're doing and how we meet is an opportunity. We were just thinking of how can we leverage the education committee similar to other committees, right? And this is how they leverage it. The other piece that I thought was actually an opportunity was that by having this, by leveraging the expertise we had within the board as far as our clinical and then potentially public or education members, we are then actually doing an additional level of scrutiny. They are having those particular conversations and asking that deeper level of inquiry that we are actually demanding for our education as we try to raise up our standards, right? And so by doing that, we then are cycling through more academic schools so that they can go back and do those changes that we're actually expecting before they actually come to you. And so that's the mission part that I was hoping for. But is it more work? Yes. So we can actually either do the more work on the staff, which is the part, or we can actually ask the board, and it's which staff members, the AGP staffs, which are more plentiful versus the NECs, or we can actually ask the board, would you consider changing your meeting times? Or meet 3 days, or elongate when we meet, or we can ask the schools to wait longer to have a decision.
Well, I'm not sure we have to decide that now, but we're talking
No, but does
about...
that make sense? Those are the things that are up in the air.
Okay, all right.
And the hope is that, we're just setting it up now, so the hope is that, this would actually, we would be allowed to see more schools in a day, which is going to happen. It would actually cut down on our times, but if it worked the other way and it actually extended our discussion time, then obviously it's not a good, if we find that in the future that we're actually spending double time on each school, that's the opposite of the goal. And one thing I also wanted to bring up is that, yes, if it's going to double work on, say, NECs or double work for board members, that's not the intent. One thing that was brought up is that has been brought up by schools in the past, and I'm very just aware of it, is that when the schools come before us, all we have is the NEC report. So it's been claimed we only have one opinion. There's only been one level of review. That's all we have to go on for the board to consider. This would now have two levels of review on it. It would have the NECs and it would have our fellow board members, which make up the education committee. So we would be getting more deeper review and from different, from one from staff and one from board members. So that also enriches the amount of information that we're getting, is what I'm trying to say. But yes, the goal is not to make more work, please.
Madam President?
Yes, Dr. Basti Martinez.
I personally did not feel like it was double or extra work as a committee member. I found the opportunity to work with a colleague and meet with the school so that the school could talk and tell us and respond to us about their own circumstance and situation quite helpful. It provided, in my opinion, more time for the individual school than we're able to provide in this room. And I want to also echo the fact that it would happen before the quarterly board meeting. It would, if necessary, give a school moving to initial provisional status an opportunity to go back and look at themselves, if they chose, and they could be in communication with our educational consultants. So there might actually be more hopeful, better from their perspective, the school's perspective, information at the time of the board meeting.
Very good points. Ms. Norton.
I remembered what my other question was. It also says that the role of the Education Committee is to gather input from the publics, and so my question was, what is the input and how are they gathering it?
What was the question? I couldn't hear.
Well, it says here, specifically, the committee is charged with gathering public input and making recommendations to the board. So is the public input, gathering input from the schools? It's on this very first page.
Yeah, that actually, you kind of segue exactly to where I wanted to bring up, just to kind of help frame the issue, hopefully. First of all, in terms of context, as we mentioned in the agenda, we're on 22B, policies and delegations to standing committees. You're right, there have been multiple descriptions of the education committee that are already existing. At this point, the question is about delegating a new task. And just in terms of framing the issue, you have flexibility there. Staff is presenting the option it's discussing in terms of taking, for example, placement on provisional, siphoning off those particular schools, and that is an option. Another issue that's sort of framed is the idea of a two-person committee. But BRN was mentioned earlier, and just so you're aware, BRN, as I understand it, has a four-person committee. So in other words, 4 board members are able to take an in-depth look at each of the schools. And then, so I say that to mean that you have some various options there as well. In other words, composition of the committee, type of work of the committee, all of that is somewhat open-ended at this point in terms of what you delegate to it. And then in terms of the extent or the effect of that, and this has been touched on here and there, there's the idea of how to make things more efficient. I think obviously that goal in and of itself is great, and I think there's some good pieces in here to get there, but legally speaking, I want to emphasize that the schools are still invited to come back and speak to the full board. There's still, I see a lot of agreement, so I don't mean to repeat anything, but the idea is that there's still layers, perhaps, of the time taken to come and present in front of the board and have the full board consider what the school said, what the NECs said, perhaps what the committee weighed in on in terms of their recommendation, and then what the school and the NECs might say the day of the full board meeting as well. So just to hopefully give a full picture of what this entails.
That's actually really helpful, and I'm glad legal did advise us to that. Board Member Norton, one of the things that, just an example of that, is that earlier we heard today from the South Region directors, and we were talking about a potential to expeditiously address their point 2 on their letter, and this would be that public, right? That is an example of the public coming before the committee and potentially discussing that. Should the board actually delegate that to the education committee? That's such a public entity that could come before the education committee and actually have that discussion.
Okay, do we have any more discussion, board member questions about the education committee? Jonathan, I'm surprised to see you raising your hand. Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Burke. I'm Board and Bureau Relations Manager at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I just wanted to make a minor clarification to something that was mentioned a little bit earlier. There seems to be an implication.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I would like to make a minor clarification on something that was stated earlier or implied earlier as to how agendas and notifications are actually dispersed. Those come from the program. They do not come from DCA. DCA maintains a meeting calendar, but it's really an aggregator of what the boards and bureaus have sent out. DCA's role with the agenda is DCA legal counsel scrutinizes it, and then the program sends it out. Just wanted to make sure in case there were any concerns or questions as to where those.
Thank you. I missed that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, agendas are sent out by the program, so if there was some miscommunication earlier, let's have that corrected. Mr. Dabrowski.
So initially, it was a little tougher to go through that section initially just because it seemed so new and different. The process that we kind of set forth, do you have an inkling as to at what point you'll reevaluate the effectiveness or what's working and what's not? And will it just be a fluid change, or will it be, we're going to implement this for the next 6 months and then reevaluate it fully?
So, the full board only meets every quarter. So we have to try what we think will work, put it together, and then see how it runs. We have to put our engine together and then see how it runs at the full board meeting. So at the next, if we delegate this authority to the education committee, what I envision is Dr. Brown, the NEC's education committee, all working together, taking our suggestions, making the improvements that we suggested, and putting that engine together. Now, in November, we're going to see how that engine runs. And hopefully it would be with less stalls.
Okay, and wait, and did I read it right that it was about a 2-hour meeting?
It was about.
A couple hours? Okay. Because I like that a lot better than a full day, adding another full day. But I'm sure the committee members and the staff involved still takes a lot of staff time to get it prepped too.
Sure, and that's, I also want, as Ms. Anderson spoke of earlier, the NECs were consulted. You didn't throw this on the NECs, our overworked NECs, and say, so it was something that the NECs felt could work, and the committee was willing to put in the time, and so that's how it's gone so far. So basically, the answer to your question is, we would make the improvements given, and at subsequent board meetings, see how it run until we have a smooth Corvette that purrs as it goes down the highway. So we have two issues here. One is that two things have been brought up. One is that we need to vote as a board on if we are going to delegate this authority to the Education Committee. The other thing that has been discussed is if we do delegate this authority to the Education Committee, we would also need a motion on if we are going to send the Southern California Vocational Program Directors Association, allow them to meet with the Education Committee before coming back to the full board. So we actually have two things we need to take in order. Is there more discussion on, we're going to need to vote on what, if any, duties and authority we want to delegate to the Education Committee. Do we feel like we've had enough discussion to come up with a motion about that?
I just want to clarify, when you say delegate authority, I want to make it clear that you're not proposing to delegate decision-making authority or discretionary acts. You've been discussing delegating the task of bringing back recommendations. I just want to clarify that.
So
Thanks.
I'm going to say this on the record because this keeps coming up. No school would ever be seen only by the Education Committee and not have their chance in front of the full board. What we're talking about is allowing schools that are coming forward for their initial provisional approval to be seen on two levels, have their concerns addressed on two levels with board. One is the Education Committee. Then they will also always, for each school, also come before the full board at the next board meeting. So you get, there's NEC makes their report and recommendations, Education Committee sees you, makes their recommendations. The decision is only held by the full board. Okay, so I want to go on the record and say that. It keeps coming up. Ms. Norton.
Could we also have it be could we also send schools to the committee that we feel would benefit from further investigation, i.e. schools that are possibly seeking revocation?
Yes, if we wanted to delegate that to them, yes. Just like we talked about with Southern California, the Directors Association, we could we could vote on whether sending that also to we could send other things to the committee other than just initial provisional, yes.
How does the committee feel about that?
I'm sorry?
I asked the committee how they felt about that.
I like that. I was kind of thinking.
So just 1 second. We're going to let Dr. Baste Martinez and Mr. Vertito share their opinion about that suggestion.
Go right ahead, John.
I would welcome the opportunity to give these schools a chance to screen them initially Since I have opened schools before and taken a look at curriculum, I'd love to be able to help them get started, but in a right way, so that the chances of them being unsuccessful are minimized and the ability to be successful maximized in that regard. In regard to schools that are on the brink of going on probation or on probation, the possibility of closing, I would love to have the opportunity to make them successful. It was alluded to earlier by another school that we did revoke, that they wish they had more time. In their case, it was my feelings were echoed by Dr. My colleague on the committee, Dr. Bernadine. I apologize.
Okay.
I do. But it would have been helpful if they're on probation, to come see us and see if we could toss them a lifeline before it actually comes to the final vote. Especially schools that have been on long-term probation, there's going to be an end of the rope. So at least if we could throw out a little bit last rope before we come here for that type of final vote. I don't want to be last minute. Schools are put on probation. They know they have to pull it up. And we've had many schools take that rope and pull themselves out of the rut, and a lot of schools that don't and go deeper. It'd be nice to be able to have them a little bit more one-on-one, saying, we really need you to be successful and you really need to help yourself. And what can we do to make that happen? So I, for one, would welcome that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vertito. Do we have any other board member questions or comments about the Education Committee? So,
right here.
Oh, Mr. Bronstein.
And I've been digging through trying to find it, and of course I can't find it, but when we typically say something along the lines of, and place this school on the agenda, and we're talking as a board, we're talking, maybe a year and a half out. But let that be the trigger to put them on the Education Committee's agenda, maybe 6 months or 8 months before that. Just for a check-in, that would be my recommendation.
That does give them a little bit of cushion to prepare for our meeting.
And feedback.
And feedback, because I think we're very thorough with the guidance of our NEC and supervising NEC. We are fairly well prepared on what the schools are facing. Sure. And they know what our expectations would be once they're placed on probation or become noticed in the board. We could hold them fully accountable and yet give them the time they need to try to make things right.
Great. And before we get into talking about how the logistics and working it out, we do need to vote on whether we want to even do the action. So at this time, if you would allow me, I would like to move to delegate to the Education Committee initial screening of schools to be placed on initial provisional approval and make recommendations to the full board. Second. So it's been moved and seconded? Yes? Ms. Martin?
I'd like to modify that motion to include the ability to send other things to the school, so they don't have to come to the committee, so they wouldn't have to come back and then make a motion to send other things.
So my understanding from legal, which I see here, is that we would have to delegate the initial authority or duty to them, and then any other things that we want to send to them on a case-by-case basis, we could vote on and move to, but we can't give a carte blanche.
And maybe this is because I had trouble hearing the original. What was your comment, Ms. Norton? Sorry.
So it seems like the motion was very specific. It specifically said to authorize the committee to see the people that are going on initial provisional I would like to modify that we authorize the committee to see the initial provisional, and also that we have the ability to delegate other things to the committee, so that we don't have to come back each time and go, well, now we want to give the committee this, and well, now we want to give the committee that.
Okay, that makes sense. I think there's maybe two components. On the one hand, you could be structuring the work you intend to take, for them to take on generally at this point. So for example, if you mean that sort of chunk of schools or category of schools, like schools going on provisional approval for the first time, that could be broadened or narrowed. And then I think a second component is sometimes the general policy type of items you might be delegating to the education committee on a case-by-case basis for them to handle. So I think, which I think that still is provided for. And I think in the first category, that's what you're kind of shaping now, is how much do you want them to be taking on? Which types of schools, I mean, in other words, in the process, how broad of a swath of action do you want them reviewing or making recommendations on? And by the way, this also again ties into the sort of construction itself of the committee, because that's another component that I think wasn't really addressed directly. I think at this point you had a 2-member committee, and the board may want to clarify, we want a 2-member committee, or they might want to emulate BRN, or they may, different aspects could lead to different results of when the recommendations come back, as far as how many people have been a part of that process and all that. So,
two things. One, I wrote something down that may encompass your suggestion and maybe be legally viable at the same time. And as far as the composition of the board, of the committee, it's a valid point that council brings up. One thing that I have heard very clearly from board members in the past is that we want our committees to be maintained at 2-person. If we go to 3 people, remember, then all meetings have to be noticed and fully open, that sort of thing. So in the past, board members have said, for efficiency and the amount of work, we would like to remain a 2-person committee. Is that still the board's pleasure, to remain having a 2-person?
And let me just also say, those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, because in other words, you could have a 2-person committee, and for a task like this, that's typically done at a full board meeting, you still might want, much like BRN does, for it to be open and publicly noticed and invite anyone from the public, as opposed to the idea that you're sort of moving it over.
We never, ever will discourage transparency. Never, ever. The only thing I was just saying that in the past, the board members have been loud and clear about their desire to maintain committees at 2-person. So that was, I appreciate and respect your desire for that. Is that what the board members still desire, is to keep committees at 2-person?
Yes?
Yes? No?
It's fine with me.
Yes?
Okay, I have another piece to add. So to my earlier thought, the example is place the program on the board's July 2018 agenda for reconsideration of provisional. So also looking at those schools that are currently on provisional approval, have the committee look at that school about 6 months before. So if we're going to see as a full board, we're going to see that school in July, have the committee see them sometime in the earlier part of the year. I don't know if we want to say approximately 6 months before, or how we would best accomplish that, but
We're not sure if they're going to see anyone yet. We haven't voted. So,
but can I add that to the motion?
well, I think what I did right maybe encompasses that.
The original motion?
No, I revised it, and I was going to run it by the board to see if it, one, addresses Board Member Norton's suggestion, if it addresses Board Member DeBrownstein's suggestion, and if it is legally viable, more importantly. So I rewrote my motion here to say move to delegate to the two-person Education Committee initial screening of schools to be placed on initial provisional approval, and to make recommendations to the full board, and to review other school matters as deemed necessary and make recommendations to the full board on those matters. Silence. Legal thoughts?
I don't have objection to that.
Okay. Ms. Norton? Okay, Mr. DeBronstein?
I'm not sure that it's clear enough for what I intend. I'm willing to give it a try.
Oh, thank you for your generosity. There is a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. Tammy, do you, the second, it has been amended. Would you like to second the amended? Thank you. So there's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. At this time, I would like to receive public comment about the motion on the floor. Is there any member of the audience, any public member that would like, any public audience member that would like to provide comment on this motion that is currently on the table? Ma'am.
Hi, Noreen Marks with the Department of Consumer Affairs. I don't think I was quite clear on the motion of what the delegation of other school matters was.
That's why I was asking if it was legally viable. It was left broad on purpose. And to review other school matters as deemed necessary, and to make recommendations on those matters to the full board. So we're talking about many different things. We're talking about schools that want to admit students. We're talking about the Directors Association. We're talking about schools that are going to be revoked. Instead of listing every single thing, including that as a broad category.
I think the distinction was that it would be voted on by the board each time they wanted to send something to the
Yes.
committee if it were outside the initial provisional category.
And so that
In other words, it sounded from the motion like schools that would be going on initially put on provisional approval would be sent to the committee, and other items as voted on by the board on a case-by-case basis could be sent to the committee. That's what I heard.
So there would be future delegations down the road, in other words.
That's what it sounded like.
Under this current motion.
Right, so the motion is simply that the delegations can be amended again in the future. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I
Or
think
are you
more
suggesting that there are
specifically-
other things that are going to go to the committee that are simply in the realm of school matters?
Yes, that's what I was suggesting.
Does everyone know what that means? I'm not entirely sure I do. I think that's my first comment, and my second comment is, I understand that the board's desire for two-person committee, they are easier to get together. My suggestion, however, is that you continue to notice them as you would any committee under Bagley-Keene, because you're going to have to give the schools 10 days' notice anyway, and for transparency to the public, I would really recommend that you either agree that you will follow the notice rules under Bagley-Keene or expand the committee to at least 3 members.
Okay, so Mr. DeBronstein, then we would have to take your suggestion either as a separate motion or add it to this convoluted one. I'd rather take it as a separate motion.
I'll make it as a separate motion
Okay,
after.
thank you. So now, we're now backtracking, and we're going back to the original motion, which is to move to delegate to the two-person education committee initial screening of schools to be placed on initial provisional approval and to make recommendations to the full board. And I'm looking to Board Member Ndozo to see if she would like to second the amended. Ms. Avella, have a comment?
Oh, yeah, I have a comment. I'm sure I'm in the minority, and I don't want to hold up, this is more of a rhetorical statement or for the record, but I'm concerned that having a small committee work with and look at and pre-screen recommendations might create an opportunity for bias. I understand board members have the final vote, but I think there's a possibility that could potentially influence, might have some undue influence, and even on the NECs, either to possibly reevaluate their recommendations at the board meeting and ongoing. So I'm concerned about sort of pre-screening by board members, and that's just, no one has to answer that, but that's my concern.
Sure, so I hear you, because that's something we definitely do not want. We do not want there to be bias or influence. Is that something you were saying to increase the number of people on the board, on the committee, or just delegating to the committee at all?
No committee at all.
Okay,
no.
that's what I thought you were saying. Okay, actually, where we were actually at was public comment on the motion on the floor. So I want to make sure public understands the motion that's currently on the floor, which is just to delegate to the education committee, two-person education committee, initial screening of schools to be placed on initial provisional approval, and only that, and to make recommendations to the full board. Is there public comment on that motion? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Wait, so we removed the other items?
Yes.
Arvella Baddick, actually from Glendale Career College. I just want to be able to understand, and is it the one that you're now forming as a committee, just if you can clarify if that one is public or private?
No, public.
Okay, because I think that's the portion that I didn't hear correctly. Yes.
Well, actually, I want to make sure I understand you. By public, do you mean that public can attend?
Yes.
I'm also going to let Dr. Brown address that, because the last committee meeting was also noticed, and she is in charge of doing the noticing. So did you want to make a comment?
Public can attend, is that the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, at all times, yes. Again, I think we talked at the director's forum yesterday. My house is open, yes, everybody can attend. Public,
Okay.
that is always to be public, yes.
All right, thank you.
Hi. Noreen Marks again. My understanding is that that last committee meeting was either not noticed or was noticed with very little notice, for one. For two, I want to echo, I'm sorry, I can't see your last name, but what this board member said about the smaller the committee, the greater, I may be putting words in your mouth, but the greater chance for bias. I do believe that with a larger committee, you get a lot more consistency in your recommendations. And I would really urge you to do that. And if you decide not to, that you do delegate to the committee that what you're suggesting, but with the caveat that they do notice those meetings pursuant to Bagley-Keene, even though they may not be required to, because I do think that 10 days, you're going to have to, as I said, you're going to have to give the schools notice anyway. Yep. So I don't know what the problem would be with not providing at least 10 days notice.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify something that you said, because I believe you said that the last meeting was not noticed properly, and that was not my understanding, so now I'm concerned. Now I'm concerned.
I'll double check with Cheryl, because the schools had more than enough time, and we did make the public aware. Isn't that fair, Cheryl? Yeah, so I don't know if that may be some clarification I wasn't aware of.
I heard it went up on the website, came down on the website, that it was, I don't know if it was given 10 days notice to the public interested, to the interested parties list.
So then let me make sure that there could be a case of a staffing error, but I definitely know, because all of the schools that were on the list were in attendance, so we will definitely double check on that.
The schools may have been given some notice, but the meeting itself was not.
Well, it sounds like if it went up on the site, so I'll find out what happened. Great, thank you.
Thank you. That was the first that I've heard of that.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
Thank you. I see another member of the public here.
No, I'm trying to look why they did.
Just a quick question, I guess, is, and maybe it's not a possibility, but would there be consideration for maybe a couple of public advisory members that are, chosen or selected to serve on that committee? For example, like maybe a clinical affiliate or some person that represents from that, or nursing education, that are public members to also be like volunteers on that committee.
Are you speaking of public board members or public public members?
Like just, I'm just throwing this out there, like someone, like if you said we need 2 public members, meaning someone like myself.
Not board
or
members.
Not board members,
Okay, yes.
like someone else, that they apply for being able to be elected to that position or, to serve a term for such amount of time or appointed by the EO, or I don't know if you have given any thought about that. Because that would be, I guess, outside, maybe would change the bias. I was looking to see what other education committees, throughout various states do, and that is one of the things that some of them do where they have some outside of the board or the staff itself is the opportunity maybe for a couple of people.
Thank you. Thank you for the idea.
I don't know.
Yes, we have more public comment.
I'd love to apologize for coming up so much, but I can't do it.
No apology necessary.
Danetta Garcia. No, it wasn't. Perhaps it was a glitch, because on 2 occasions, I attempted to get on that very email list that information is provided to interested parties. On each occasion, I received nothing back. And that email that is responding to the people who elect to get on that list says that you will receive an email back to acknowledge that they've received it. So twice I tried to do that, and twice nothing happened.
And it was, you tried...
To get on the interested parties list in order to ensure that I got all information regarding these special meetings. And the other caveat to that,
Yeah,
which is
let me
important...
just clarify real quick, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you were trying to get on the interested parties list through the website?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Until it gives you a site, you go into it, you sign up for it. You suspect that you're going to get that cursory email where it says it was going to come back to you.
Thank
so
you.
I've done it twice. And lastly, yes, it is always to err on the side of caution to ensure Bagley Keene is represented in total. I am somewhat an expert in the field and have gone out throughout the state of California discussing Bagley Keene and the Robert's Rules of Orders and so forth and so on. These are important issues.
Yes, they are.
And the last thing I want to say is I have a lot of bullet wounds from being the messenger, but I will continue to come forward to bring all messages to you because it's important that you know them.
Ms. Garcia, you're welcome to come forward at any time.
Thank you.
During public comment, yes. And I want to, we're getting, I'm worried that it's getting a little convoluted. I want to make a clear distinction that there is what is obeys the law, and that there is also legal opinion above and beyond what is the letter of the law. Okay, there's letter of the law and there's spirit of the law. So I want to assure anyone watching, board members, public audience, that we're not trying to do anything illegal, okay? Because we have people saying, this is not, there is some things that are advisable, but still legal, and depending on how many people you ask, there are a number of opinions, okay? So the board has to balance opinions it gets sometimes from multiple legal sources, okay? That's the balance and that's the dance. So I just want to be very clear and state, the board is not trying to do anything illegal. And I have said in the past, I will continue to say in the future, transparency is paramount. Open meeting, Bagley Keene Act is paramount. And that we operate within those bounds. Within those bounds, there are opinions on what is better or best. But we will always operate within the legal bounds of the Open Meeting Bagley and Bagley Keene Act. I just want to make that clear. Ms. Norton.
My interest in having this committee is so that we can get the very best information. I rely on the NECs and their expertise. I also rely on the expertise of the nurse educator that's on the board and the expertise of Dr., I'm not going to get your name right because it's been a long day, Bernice. I'm just going to call her Bernice. Thank you. To make my job easier, because frankly, I don't know anything about curriculum, other than I went to school. Other than that, I rely on them to give me that information. That's the beauty of having a board that has that has different educational and members on the board. So that is my interest in having this committee, because I really think that it can help us get to where we want to go, and that is that we are an efficient board providing consistent service to the schools and to the members. So I just wanted to state that.
Is there any more public comment on the motion on the table? I don't see anyone coming forward. At this time, we do have a motion on the table. We've had several motions, amended motions, changed motions, and I do want to address the motion that is currently on the floor. If it dies, and we can make another motion. On the motion that's currently on the floor and that has been seconded, any further board discussion before we take a roll call vote?
Would it be fair to clarify that motion at this point? It's been a while.
I would love to.
Okay, and I also want to make sure, because as you mentioned, there were some changes, so I want to make sure that the first and the second of the motion are on the same page.
Sure.
We have that you've moved to delegate to a two-person committee, review of schools that could be placed on provisional approval in order to bring back a recommendation to the full board at the full board meeting.
And actually, now, I'm glad that you said that, because I do have a question for you. Our committee may increase. We may have more people in the future as we get different board members. Do we need to specify how many people are in the committee?
As I said, I think it would be helpful to clarify how many people you would like on the committee. You incorporated that in this motion. Yes.
So so that we have two, there's two issues here, and one is that, I'm going to try to say this delicately, that we have some transition of board members. We have board members that are terming out. We have board members that will be coming in, and maybe they will have expertise in different areas. I don't know what's going in or what's coming into me. The other is that historically, we've had an exceedingly difficult time with board members being able to make a time commitment to a committee. So what we have now is two. What we have now is what we have. What I would hate is if we get a new board member in and they have time available that other board members don't, and they also have, would be an appropriate fit for the Ed Committee, I would want to add them quickly. I would not want to wait to change the composition. So that would be my only, reason to want to take out the quantifier of two-person, the quantity of two. It would just be an education committee.
Madam President, if I may, our administrative procedure manual.
We haven't voted on that. Yes.
No, but it speaks to the board member composition and all that. That's why I brought that up.
Yeah, that's not an official one.
Well,
yet.
unfortunately, I'm going to have to make a couple clarifications. One is it's a draft, and two is it was not on the agenda, so it doesn't really allow for...
Let me ask if you have existing policy regarding...
No, actually, and that's exactly why they were presenting a draft policy manual to help get those policies in place.
So
because, good point.
So we've never had committees before?
Thus far, you've had committees, and you've got various descriptions in sunset reports and a listed policy. It speaks more to some of the tasks the committee takes on. It doesn't discuss the number, and it touches on the president being able to participate. It says the committee selection process. This is June 24th, 2010, appears to be board letterhead, the policy. It says committee selection process. The elected board president determines committee membership after the first board meeting of the new calendar year. Board members who have an interest in participating in a particular committee should inform the board president.
So that's existing, that's never been abrogated or repealed or otherwise modified?
Not that I've seen. The top talks about the 2 to 4 members. That's a good point. Also, in the top paragraph, there's a line that says committees are composed of 2 to 4 board members who are charged with gathering public input, maximizing use of resources, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so since we have the existing language of 2 to 4, can I put 2 to 4 if it's not advisable to take it out?
If that's the board's intention, it's My only role here is to try to clarify the board's intention so that whatever you go ahead and do going forward, especially with the schools that the committee may look at, I want to make sure that is established in a clear way so that it can't be questioned later.
Sure, and so what I'm trying to do is meet in the middle and not have no description of the committee, but not be locked into two and be available to add a third or fourth member if that were to ever become available. So I think meeting in the middle, Tammy, I don't know if you want to second a motion that I'm going to amend, would be to move to delegate to the 2 to 4 person education committee initial screening of schools to be placed on initial provisional approval and to make recommendations to the full board. That is my motion, Tammy. I don't know if you would like to second that.
I'll second the amended motion.
Thank you. I think that that's a half medium. Mr. de Brownstein.
I'm asking on clarification of the motion.
Thank you.
Does it include that these meetings will be noticed per the Bagley-Keene Act?
It does not say that currently.
Can we include that?
Sure. I feel that it's a little bit redundant, but if you want to include that, we can include that.
I think at this point it's fair to make sure there's no assumptions and to clarify each component of what the board intends.
So,
and also, actually along those lines, there's a 2014 sunset report that refers to a 2 to 3 member committees. So even though it doesn't appear to be a policy, it's another reason why I think it'd be important to be clear what the board intends at this point.
Okay, so can we take out the number of people?
I just think one way or another, it's important to address each aspect of how the board expects its committee to perform.
Okay, Ms. Avella.
Yeah, this is minority speaking again, I think. In addition to bias, I guess what I'm concerned about is, I think the origin of this was initially to try to streamline the board's discussions at board meetings about how to evaluate provisional approval schools, right? So it seems to me we're creating like a whole infrastructure to do that. I mean, we're talking about, a larger committee. Somebody talked about advisory people. We're going to have monthly meetings that we have to publicly notice, which requires work. The NECs have to prepare for these meetings. There's fallout always with people not getting the emails. I mean, we're creating a kind of a monster here to deal with just a couple of decisions, a handful of decisions of schools that we look at. As far as the expertise of individuals that serve on the education committee, I can get that in board meetings, and I do get that. So I'm really questioning the machine that we're creating to streamline, a couple hours of board discussions. I don't think we're doing that. I think we're creating a lot more work.
And the machine is actually picking up a lot more words to the motion as it gets moved along. So, is there any discussion on this side? I haven't looked over here at you guys for a while. What I'm trying to do, and I'm going to make one more motion. If this motion doesn't have legs, I'm going to withdraw my motion and wait for someone else to make a motion. So
I think there's a motion already on the floor.
yes, but I'm going to amend it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Dr. Bastin-Martinez.
Call the question.
Thank you. I just was shocked to hear you say that. So actually, I'm amending the motion, and the motion is going to say, move to delegate to the Education Committee initial screening of schools to be placed on initial provisional approval and to make recommendations to the full board. All meetings of the Education Committee will be duly noticed according to the Bagley-Keene Act. Tammy, would you like to second that?
Second that.
Okay, there has been a motion. It has been seconded. The question has been called, which means we are now going to have a roll call vote on the motion I just described. Ms. Norton.
Actually, I just have one question. If it's duly noticed, does that mean it's going to be noticed whether or not it's required to be noticed? Because if a two-person committee is not required to be noticed, I want to make sure that what you're saying is duly noticed means that it is going to be noticed whether or not it's required.
She did say in the motion that all of these committee meetings would be duly noticed according to Bagley-Keene. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And then if we have any other public comment, otherwise you can call the question.
Let me take a deep breath. Okay, Rebecca, are you indicating that we need to take public comment on this motion? Is that what the legal authority is?
That's generally the procedure, yes.
So, we will now take public comment on the motion currently on the floor and was seconded. Is there any public comment on the motion on the table at this time? Not seeing any. The question has been called. I'm now going to take a roll call vote, starting on my far left with Board Member Norton.
Yes.
Mr. Vertito.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, Mr.
Yes.
Dr. Basti Martinez. Vice President Moreno.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mr. DeBronstein.
Yes.
Ms. Avella.
I'm a no.
Thank you. Mr. Durkin.
Yes.
Okay, there is a majority of yes, so that motion passes.
Madam President, before you close this item, I would like to add an additional motion.
Please.
And it would be worded, place on the Education Committee agenda schools that are within 2 quarters of coming to the full board for reinstatement of provisional approval and present a report to be included to the full board at that meeting. Wow.
Thank you, Mr. DeBronstein.
It made sense.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please? Can you repeat it so we
Yes.
can get it down?
So it's to place on the Education Committee agenda schools that are within 2 quarters of coming to the full board for reconsideration of provisional approval and present a report to be included with the full report to the board.
There's been a motion put forward. Is there a second for this motion?
A second.
Hey,
I'll speak to it.
there's been a motion. There's been a second. Did you want to add something, Mr. DeBronstein?
My feeling is sometimes when schools come before us for reconsideration of provisional approval, sometimes they seem unprepared, and I think this step will be a quick step to give them a brief overview and give the board a brief report as to how they were about 2 quarters out before coming to the full board.
Great. There's a motion, and it has been seconded. At this time, I would like to take public comment on the motion on the table. Is there anyone that would like to provide comment on this motion? Nope. Is there any further board discussion on Mr. DeBronstein's motion?
Yes, one question.
Mr. Durkin.
Would it cause any kind of adverse impact on staff as far as,
I see Dr. Brown nodding her head, so we'll let her answer that.
I'm just thinking in terms of sequencing, in terms of those 2 quarters, in terms of those for reconsideration, those are, that volume is is a lot different than the volume as far as initial provisional, and I'm just concerned about that. As well as within 2 quarters, and making sure that we're keeping up with that, as well as making sure that we're keeping up with the goal of increasing our site visits, as well as those that are making sure that they're getting their annual visits, as well as those that are doing their other visits. I do see that being a negative impact, because that is going to be a whole new band of work of keeping up with those 2 quarters. But I just want to call that out.
Okay, any further board discussion on the motion of Mr. DeBronstein? Okay, I will take a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Durkin.
I'm going to vote no.
Okay. Ms. Avella?
No.
Mr. DeBronstein?
Yes.
I'm a no. Vice President Moreno?
No.
Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Dr. Basti Martinez?
Abstain.
Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Ms. Norton?
Yes.
So I will ask for legal advice. We have a 441.
And so it fails to pass, the motion.
So motion fails to pass on the 4 yes, 4 no, 1 abstain.
I'm seeing some concerned looks, so I'm going to go ahead and verify. But The vote was 4-4 with one abstention. There was no majority. So I just want to make sure while we're in the moment that we don't pass anything up.
Yeah, please, let's take care of it now.
Right.
So it
That's my
fails.
point. So I'm saying the motion would fail. The motion did not pass.
Oh, did not pass.
That's correct.
Oh, I thought you said pass. Never mind.
Sorry.
So motion does not pass, is what I think we have consensus? Yes?
We have legal consensus, which is very rare.
I'm quite frankly shocked that we have legal consensus of anything today. Okay. I'm sorry, let me just catch up here. And I do notice that we have Mr. Vertito back in the room. Mr. Vertito, you may not have known that while you were out of the room, we did present do a presentation for Mr. DeBronstein. And I also have something for you that I wasn't able to present to you. You were not in the room at the time. So before we move on to agenda item number 19, I would like to take a moment out and have a presentation for our esteemed colleague, educator member, Mr. John Vertito. I see Jay back here with the, let me turn on the handheld mic. As we saw earlier, I had a similar plaque and a resolution for Mr. DeBronstein. I regret to inform you that your Assemblywoman, the office did not get the resolution done quite in time to have board staff pick it up and transport it to Los Angeles. So you do have a resolution from the Assemblywoman's office. They are putting the final signatures on it and framing it, and we will get it to you. What I do have to present to you is this appreciation award to John Vertito in recognition of your outstanding achievements, dedicated service to the California State Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians 2005 to 2016. And the resolution is upcoming. And I'd just like to take a couple moments. John has been on the board since 2005. Long since I was a board member, I came to meetings, and I remember John being on the board, and I remember always appreciating his expertise. The knowledge and the experience that you've brought to our board has been outstanding and is quite frankly irreplaceable. Your dedication to the board is unsurpassed. You always show to meetings, you always have input to give. You are also always a fully proactive, productive member of the board. And I want you to know that I do appreciate that. I appreciate all that you've done for the board. I hope that you will be here for the next meeting. But because we do not know when the replacements for you and Todd are coming, I wanted to make sure that we were able to do this in an open forum and express our appreciation, not just from me, but from the whole board. To you. Like I said, your contributions have been amazing, outstanding, and you're quite frankly irreplaceable.
Thank you. Madam President, my colleagues, thank you. It's twice this meeting you've surprised me. For those of you who don't know, I had my birthday on Wednesday. So my staff and my colleagues surprised me twice now. It's been an honor. It has been something that I thank both Governor Brown and Governor Schwarzenegger for the opportunity to serve here and to meet people from across the board. My colleagues here has been a reward of a lifetime. The honor, the prestige of being appointed pales in comparison to the work that we do here. Very few times in a person's life you have the opportunity to serve and impact your profession in a positive manner. And I think my working with my colleagues up here on the dais, with the schools and the students throughout the state, I hope I've made a positive impact for nursing, for vocational nurses in particular, and to the people of California to ensure that we produce the best nurses and psych techs in the nation. To our NECs and the other staff, but the NECs in particular, you are the guardians to make sure our standards never fail, that they continue to rise, and that our profession continues to be respected and, respected and flourishes, because the lives of our fellow citizens rest in all of our hands. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to take that moment to show appreciation to both Board Member Vertito and Board Member Brownstein. I appreciate your service. Okay, and let's move on to agenda item number 19, Human Resources Overview.
Madam President,
Yes,
I
Mr.
believe our
Durkin.
agenda says a lunch break.
We're adjourning to lunch break at this time. Ricardo, good lunch. Okay. Yes, you are correct, Mr. Deerking. The agenda does indicate that. However, that was earlier. So we're at agenda item number 19, Human Resources Overview. Ricardo de la Cruz, Personnel Officer, Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Human Resources. Ricardo, I thank you for being here. I know it's 4:03. I know you've been here. I've seen you sitting here all day, so I do apologize for the delay that the board meeting has taken today, and I thank you for your perseverance in joining us.
No need to apologize. It's been my pleasure. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Brown, thank you for having me here today. I'm here today to provide updates related to Human Resources Branch. The last time that I had the honor of addressing the board was in November of 2015 during open session, and I'm here to provide updates that have impacted the board and the state in general since then.
Can you speak into the microphone?
My apologies. So the first item that I wanted to update on today is the hiring and vacancies. And the first item that's been impacting the whole state of California, but more in particular the Board of Vocational Nursing, is the launch of the Examination and Certification Online System, or the acronym of ECOS. This amazing new technology launched in January of 2016. It allows, what it does in an essence from our user side, from our candidate side, and the board has already reaped the benefits of this, is that it allows candidates to apply for vacancies, for any state vacancies, but more importantly, for the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians, they can apply online. The state is gravitating away from the paper, the outdated and the archaic paper and pen application, and is going more the way of applying online. And one of the also benefits for it for our hiring managers, and I'll use Ms. Cheryl Anderson as an example, is that should a vacancy ever occur, and we're hoping that it doesn't, over with her NECs, is that she'll be able to screen the applications, view the applications, and actually categorize the applications in online. She won't have to, and no hiring manager will have to look through applications, a stack of papers, and try to grade them like a lot of us were doing as hiring managers several months ago. But now we will be able to go through them online and screen them and help expedite the hiring process. So the state of California is very excited about all these different changes that are headed towards helping to recruit and helping to hire people a lot faster. One of the things that's also going to integrate into this new system is examinations. Examinations for state classifications will be integrated into this by 2017. So there's a huge push towards this all-encompassing online system that will help speed up the hiring process. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about today is the State Controller's Office and their position tracking. It's one of the methods that the state of California has historically used in order to get an accurate position count. However, with the State Controller's Office, it's an archaic system. It's a great system, however, it is starting to show its age. And one of the mechanisms in it that shows its age is that it's always a month behind. The State Controller's Office is always a month behind. It's a month behind in leave balances, in benefits, in payroll. and also with position tracking. And it only tracks position authority in terms of what's actually approved, not what's actually current. So what we did is OHR, the Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Human Resources, partnered up with our Office of Information Systems to create an online database for us internally with DCA so that we can pull from all our different resources to give our clients, the Board of Vocational Nursing, a more accurate, and not just the board, but all our other boards and bureaus, an accurate real-time depiction of what our positions are. So we pull from the State Controller's Office database. We also pull a separation database. We also look through the request for personnel actions. If we have a new hire, if we're reclassifying a position, we'll gather that data and incorporate this into this new database. And we piloted, actually, and secretly we didn't even announce it to anybody. We did pilot with the Board of Vocational Nursing because we wanted to test it out, make sure it ran well. And happy to say that at least within this first week of our mini launch, that at least from our programs, from my staff's perspective, it seems to be working rather cohesively. One of the things that we're doing in order to get better data, to get more accurate data, is that we'll have board staff review it before we publish it. That way it gives both of our opportunities to both staff an opportunity to review, and that way we have a comprehensive, up-to-date data. So we're very excited about launching this new database. It'll allow programs an opportunity to get real-time, monthly stats that are actually reflective of its current landscape and its current. It'll help the board give a proper assessment of where their needs are and where changes need to be made. Next, I wanted to talk about recruitment efforts. And while I appreciate the comments of Dr. Brown, and I do thank her for those comments earlier today, Dr. Brown really does deserve a lot of the credit in terms of the recruitment and the changes that have been going forward, that have been seen through the board. Unfortunately, it stole my thunder about talking about the NECs and how it's fully staffed. But also, Dr. Brown has examined, since day one, Dr. Brown has examined her current structure and current processes and looked for improvements. She has not gone for status quo and always gone for what makes the board run better, what makes the product better for not just the board, but for the staff and also for the schools and the licensees and ultimately the public. And OHR continues to work with board staff through Dr. Brown's efforts to improve the expeditious processing of any of our hires. The longer the hires do not get made and expedited through the board, it's a delay that is felt through our licensees, through the schools. And we're trying to make those efforts, and we are working in a collaborative effort with Dr. Brown. And we do thank Dr. Brown for implementing so many different changes.
Ricardo?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. One thing is, I do anticipate that board members are going to have a lot of questions for you. So I'm wondering if, I notice you have very nice categories here. If maybe we could stop at the end of each category and get board member questions on that specific category. Does that work? Rebecca? Is that okay?
And I should also announce that I also have copies for the public also at the table up at the front. So
Great. So because I know some of these items we're going to have very specific questions on. So we're now on the topic of hiring vacancies. Thank you, Ricardo, for your report on that portion. Do board members have any questions for Mr. De La Cruz about this section, hiring and vacancies?
I have one.
Ms. Mendoza?
So for the ecosystem, is that also a part of the CSI project that they're working on?
Yes.
Or is it separate?
It's one of the CSI projects, which is the Civil Service Improvement Project. The Civil Service Improvement Project was this project launched by the California Government Operations Agency, which oversees the State Personnel Board and the California Department of Human Resources. And this project was essentially to take our current method, our current archaic, outdated, I was going to use a word that would probably get me in trouble, but a process that needed improvement. It was time for us to catch up to the 21st century, and that is what the CSI project was intended. We took 1,500 classifications that no longer were applicable, that were no longer, I believe one of them was pianist, and the state of California got rid of it. We abolished 1,500 classifications. We're revising classifications. We're looking at the state of California is looking at every classification and looking at how can it make it better? How can candidates be able to type in on the jobs website in terms of the job duties and actually tie it to the classification, and actually bringing it more modern and bringing it more attractive to not just our current candidate pool, but also looking at the millennials as well.
Dr. Brown, did you want to make a comment?
So I just wanted to give, just to help the board for just a perspective, because Ricardo is very humble about what he and Ms. Lee, who's in the back's team, has done for us. They, when we came in, we asked for a tall order. We did not simply just ask to hire a few folks. We actually asked for the actual reclassification of about 9 different positions that we felt these were vital. For instance, we did not have a budget analyst dedicated to actually look at our budget. We did not have our own reg person, a legislative analyst dedicated, and so we actually reclassed a position to get that done. They were nimble in getting that for us. The other thing that we asked for is that then we went about in our entire licensing division, and we basically said we needed to actually redo duty statements after we saw that we had duty statements, as I mentioned to you guys in one time, that actually said work on backlog. So we were basically preparing to always have a backlog. And his, appreciating that his staff he had been on the job for about a year, and appreciating that he was doing his own internal working, his staff had no prep time for the mass undertaking we were doing, and they were extremely responsive and met with us at sometimes monthly, all hands on deck, to work on this for us and to do this big change undertaking that really was kind of unprecedented. So I don't think while this is a very high-level overview, I think that he is being very humble in terms of the outreach, that it went all the way to the top to his deputy director at getting us what we needed to really get us from 20 years behind in terms of getting standardized duty statements, in terms of getting us the real critical positions that we needed, in terms of being responsive. So again, I thank you. I think he's just probably being too modest to tell you about all the efforts that went into helping us and continue to go in.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments to Mr. De La Cruz? Great. First section done. So now we'll move into the CEA request, and I just want to give board members a little bit of background. As Mr. De La Cruz alluded to, we have been, as board members know, pursuing a restructuring under the guidance under Dr. Brown. She had come in, and we've all seen the org chart and the flattening of the org chart. It's actually a critical part of our restructuring, and as Dr. Brown would say, the renaissance of our board, to get this organizational restructuring put through. And to that, we have to change the former assistant executive officer CEA position to a different position. It requires that level. It's something that is supported by the bodies that govern us and review us. But it's been turned out to be a little bit of we've had some obstacles, would you say, Mr. De La Cruz?
That is correct.
And I know that DCA has worked with us. Myself, Vice President Moreno, Dr. Brown, and DCA staff have met numerous times about this issue and how to move it forward. So this is something we have been working diligently on, and you have been working very diligently on. So I wanted to, in case board members were wondering what the CEA was, I wanted to put that out there.
I was actually wondering what the CEA stand for.
What?
It stands for Career Executive Assignment.
Couldn't understand you.
I'm sorry, it's an acronym for the Career Executive Assignment. It's an executive level position within civil service. The way the board had historically used this position was as the Assistant Executive Officer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other clarifications on that? So yes, it's something we have been working on. I do believe that you have an update. We have some forward motion in this. So
correct.
Please.
So Dr. Brown did submit a request to redirect the Assistant Executive Officer. However, CalHR, whenever there's the California Department of Human Resources, which is known as CalHR, whenever there's a proposed change to an existing allocation, they do require a 30-day review. It's a public posting. It is, it's on the public website, and it's open for comment and review at that simultaneous period. Dr. Brown did submit a request, worked with my office in terms of submitting it and having it posted on the website back in May of 2016. CalHR did have additional questions, did pause the review, the 30-day review, and have we've had discussions with CalHR in terms of how to, and in addition with the board, to also have this have the position moved from pending over to approved. In terms of the latest updates, we do have a meeting scheduled for August 30th with the California Department of Human Resources. I just received word about 30 minutes ago from my staff that CalHR is confirming that they will be in attendance for that August 30th meeting. They did just ask for some clarifying information, and it is our intention that through the involvement of Dr. Brown and through board staff participating in that meeting along with the Directorate of DCA, that we walk out of that meeting with clear guidance, that we walk out of there with hopefully an approval, that we walk out of there with a firm deal that we can move forward with the CEA allocation.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the setting up of the meeting. To me, this is a foundational change that must happen for the restructuring of our board. I've said that. You've heard me say that. The executive committee has heard me say that. So I look forward to the meeting, and I'm anticipating a positive outcome. Do board members have any questions on this section about the CEA request? No? Okay. If you are ready, we can move on to the nursing education consultant salary proposal. And I will let you know that board members have historically had many questions or comments about this. I also, I've only been on the board 3 years, and I've expressed to you in the past, we've also expressed publicly that this issue is a source of frustration for our board. Not to you, nothing personal to Mr. De La Cruz, but this ongoing issue has been a source of frustration to this board, and wanting so desperately to move forward with these changes. We've been shot down a lot in the past, and I look forward to your update.
So I wanted to give an update as to the proposal. And so in December, the California Department of Human Resources reached out to all departments and had asked for proposals to be submitted. We were given about a 2-week turnaround to turn in proposals for any sort of consideration that would take place during bargaining. And what we did during that time, and prior to that time, because we were anticipating this request to come in, was that we had worked with board staff at that time to have a proposal ready. Happy to report to the board that that proposal was submitted to the California Department of Human Resources. However, as of today, the union and the state of California have not reached an agreement with a tentative contract. So that proposal is still being considered. It is possible that that proposal may be fully enacted or acted in part. However, my staff have prepared in the event that it does not get incorporated into the contract negotiations, that we meet back with the board and consider a classification specification revision, which could effectuate the salary change. It's a much harder hill to climb. However, we are willing to climb it with you.
I appreciate that. I guess a question I want to ask you, and you may not have an answer for me, is I know that this board and the staff, the board members of this board are dedicated to pursuing this change. What can this board do, if anything? Whose door do I need to knock on? Who do I need to call? Who do I need to approach? What can I do to move this forward? What can any of us do to give this thing legs, or have we done all that we can?
At this point, the board has done all that it can. It lended its support, its full support in December with the letter of support. The director of the Department of Consumer Affairs also lended his support in regards to this salary change proposal. And it carried more support than any other proposal so far that I have seen, in terms of amount of signatures that went behind it, in terms of the amount of data that was collected. So we did put as much effort into this than most departments would in terms of their proposals.
I know
Yes.
we have some questions. I know Ms. Mendoza spoke up, and then I know Mr. Vertuto would also like to comment on this. Let's go with Ms. Mendoza first. Are you ready to accept?
Of course.
Board members? Okay.
So where is the proposal at?
The proposal is with the bargaining team that it negotiates on behalf of the state of California.
Do you know what the proposal was?
Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to discuss the terms of that proposal in open session.
If I may, Madam President, I have a relevant question.
Yes, and then we'll go to Mr.
So
Vertuto.
I just want to be clear. The NEC job classification and their bargaining unit have a specific proposal currently being considered in connection with the current MOU cycle. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you.
And I believe you said you were not able to discuss this in the specifics in open session because I'm not I'm not part of the union, but because it's confidential negotiation bargaining.
Correct.
Correct. Yes, Tammy?
At this point in time, I believe that information is public information.
We can't hear you.
I believe that's public information because it's already been passed across the table.
However, I'm still not at liberty to discuss those options in open session. I apologize.
Also, Mr. Vertuto, if you would just allow me to ask one more question real quick before I preempt you. I remember there being something about arduous pay. Is that part? Can you tell me if that's part of?
There was some miscommunication in terms of arduous pay versus the pay differential.
Okay.
And what we were looking to do is effectuate the pay differential. They were essentially one and the same, and it was a misinterpretation as to which one we were going for. But however, when we looked at what the proposal was and what the board had brought up forward as a concern, it was the pay differential.
Thank you. Mr. Vertuto.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
More of a comment than that, but Mr. De La Cruz, I've been where our president has sat. I've been present. I know for a fact from painful history, our NECs have not received a pay raise for almost 8 years or more, and a service to them this is a disservice to the quality and the type and long hours of work they've done. I've actually visited our supervising NEC when there were only two, the supervising NEC and NEC, where she had a 6-inch trail, a 6-inch wide trail from her chair to the door of her office. And I fully support a pay raise, and if I'd make it retroactive in some ways if at all possible, but they work hard. They can make so much more money in the private sector, yet they dedicate their experience, their time, their knowledge to the safety and the welfare of the consumers of California. While I appreciate that this proposal has gotten the most that you've seen, anything we could do, I could do, to ensure the successful passage of this, please do not hesitate to call. They've earned it, they deserve it, and it would be a great legacy for me to leave this board, seeing that they get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vertuto. I want to ask one clarifying question, and then we'll go to Mr. Bronstein, who has a question. If the current proposal fails, could we, and I'm asking also my fellow board member, Tammy, who I know has some expertise in this, so either one of you, if the current proposal of pay differential, right, fails, could we re-seek the arduous pay?
Correct.
Yes? Do you have anything to add?
No, I'm having somebody look at it to look into it.
Oh, great, thank you. Any further questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. DeBrownstein, I almost forgot about you.
Do you sit at the table?
No, I do not.
Have no-
I'm sorry, I have to clarify, not for this particular bargaining.
Thank you. I think, Mr. De La Cruz, that you can see that there is a motion even on the board member level, and it stems from both a frustration that we haven't been able to move forward and appreciation of our staff who we feel are not compensated adequately. It's not directed towards you. Please understand. Please understand.
But thanks for being here and let us direct it right at you.
That's perfectly fine.
But thanks for standing up there.
But I do want to mention one thing. We did have one of our new NECs that came in, and again, from his office, again, kudos, that person, he was able to negotiate a significant, a relative, not significant, an increase beyond what we, what they would normally have gotten on their increase. So thank you again for that, because I think the way that they were able to match their coming in pay, which was more than what the range was going to be. So I do appreciate that, because that was someone that was really talented that we were going to lose had we not been able to match their compensation coming in the door. So thank you again for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members regarding the NEC salary negotiation, or not negotiations, proposal? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for coming forward to discuss that. Now, I would like to give a little clarification on your next agenda item. This is something I actually asked to be put on the agenda, and Vice President Moreno and I had discussed this in the past. It had, because if you remember when we actually hired Dr. Brown, we didn't perform the negotiations. It was the board members themselves, because we wanted to move quickly, did not perform the negotiations. So Vice President Moreno and I actually were not initially aware of the specifics of the salary of our newly hired executive officer. As some time went by, I started to suspect that maybe what we were providing was not competitive, and actually less than what was previously received by the person that came in, by our executive officer. This is obviously a little awkward because our executive officer is here. But I want you to know that I did speak to Dr. Brown privately before we put this on the agenda and said, this can be put on the agenda, but your business is in the open. And she did agree to it. She did not know that I had contacted. Initially, I contacted Mr. De La Cruz and Director Kadani personally. I sent an email to both of you and made an inquiry, and that was after consultation with Vice President Moreno. I had done some research on some different boards within DCA, and also you guys send me to Chicago and I meet all these people in Chicago. So I did speak to some other presidents of some boards, and just at a reception, you know, we're talking and, hey, by the way, what is your EO salary range? And I was very discouraged when the things that I heard, which made me believe even stronger that our worry that our current salary range for our EO is not competitive. So that is why I did ask Mr. De La Cruz to pursue this. Vice President Moreno, did you want to add anything?
In looking at the mechanisms, if we wanted to, maybe you can speak to what we as the board could do if we wanted to potentially raise what our EO is making to be more competitive. What would be our next steps?
And that's the intention behind this next segment, is to go over the process, and should the board elect to do this, what would entail in order to effectuate this change. So if there are no further questions, I can get started into at least going into what the process is. And the first thing I have to bring about or to advise the board on is that this is not about the incumbent. This is not about Dr. Brown.
Oh.
Unfortunately, even though her exemplary and just outstanding efforts that she has done since her appointment, this is not about the incumbent, but this is more about the position. It's about the scope and the duties and how they have significantly grown. And when, in comparison to the last time that the compensation or the level of this position has last been reviewed, it's encompassing of changes that are faced before the board. It's encompassing of changes that are in legislation. It's encompassing of changes in staffing, and also with the changes or growth within the licensee. What is our population looking and how is it changing? What is the anticipated growth? What is the anticipated legislation that this board will be facing? Or what are the different tasks that this board is taking on? Or what are the new scope and responsibilities of this board that is ultimately the responsibility of the executive officer that haven't been taken into consideration since the last time that this classification was last reviewed?
And if I could just add, sorry to interrupt you, one thing. I was also on the hiring committee. As most board members know, we had an EO for over 2 decades at our board, and so the position hadn't been reviewed for a long time. Then we put the hiring committee together, and time was of the essence. We did get something new to review, and at the time, with the limited research we had done, we thought that was we thought that was a competitive salary. And looking back, I will admit we should have done more research. It was board member Rubin and I at the time. And again, this is not about any one person. This is about the category, the position itself. Because we'd had an EO for so long, we hadn't done a lot of research into the competitive salary range. So it was brought on. We interviewed, we tried to move things forward quickly, through HR. We were moving that. Then we interviewed quickly. We wanted to hire quickly. Time was of the essence, and we did move forward the way that we thought would be the fastest and also the best. It turned out to be fairly fast, but in fact, I will admit that the hiring committee should have actually done more research, because with further investigation is when I began to suspect that we were not being competitive. Mr. De La Cruz?
So if the board is considering increasing the salary level, which in salary level is not just a compensation issue for Dr. Brown, but it actually ensures that the level of quality and the person with the knowledge, skills, and ability past Dr. Brown, it's the future. It's ensuring that the future of the board is led in a proper manner, that it's led in the appropriate manner, that mission and vision, that someone with that same skill set and that amount of knowledge will continue to be able to lead that board effectively, that you will continue to receive exemplary candidates. If the board should vote to increase the salary, a draft recommendation with the proposed new salary range will be submitted by the board president, and the Department of Consumer Affairs, by way of me, will submit it to the administration for consideration. So the items to consider. The increase may not impact Dr. Brown, depending on if the range, the minimum and the maximum, still encompasses the salary of Dr. Brown. So, for example, let's say Dr. Brown earns $1,000 per month, which is not the salary, but I'm just using that for a comparison. If she earns $1,000 per month and the salary range goes from $500 to $1,000 and it moves over to $1,000 to $2,000, her salary will not be impacted by that. However, if the salary range is moved beyond what she is currently making, in terms of the minimum is now far exceeds what she's currently making, she will be brought up to the minimum. Now, Dr. Brown is scheduled for her first review in March, and at that time the board can evaluate the performance of Dr. Brown and then propose a increase salary at that time. Or at any time, the board could also do a review and at that point elect to raise the salary at that time as well. So what I've lastly provided is a comparison chart that outlines some of the boards within the purview of the Department of Consumer Affairs to use as a guide. Now, if there's other boards nationally that run a parallel track that runs similar, that can also be used to assist in terms of assisting with the salary compensation.
You have more?
Question.
Yes, let me just also add one thing. I'm sorry, Dr. Basti-Martinez. I appreciate the research you did. As I mentioned, I also had done some, not saying very high-level research, but some research on my own, and I have it actually here in front of me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At least 8 other DCA boards do have a higher salary range than we have for their EO. And one, like I said, when I was at National Council, the one, I was talking to several different presidents, but the one that stuck out to me the most, and I will just say this, not to put down any state, but the state of West Virginia does have a fraction of licensees that we have, and their cost of living is significantly lower. I did speak at length with their president, and their salary range, the minimum of their salary range is actually higher than what our maximum is. So that was one that most stood out to me, but I did speak to other states. So I did have at least one cross-state comparison, interstate comparison. Dr. Basti-Martinez?
Question related. Does HR have anything that deals with salary equity?
The Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Human Resources does not. However, the studies regarding salary equity is conducted through the California Department of Human Resources. They publish every year that there is a salary negotiations or contracts that come up towards renegotiations. What they implemented starting this year was on their public site, they have a study on compensation. However, one of the things that I instantly looked for was to see what if the salary compensation did incorporate exempt level positions such as Dr. Brown, and unfortunately exempt positions were not included in that study.
Thank you.
Coincidentally, I also looked for the nursing education consultant, and it was not incorporated in that as well.
Of course. Should we be so lucky? Any other questions for Mr. DeBrownstein?
Okay, so did you say that the minimum would have to go above the current maximum for it to impact Dr. Brown?
For it to impact Dr. Brown on a current basis, yes.
So we couldn't just raise the maximum?
You could, but without moving over the minimum, Dr. Brown will not see an impact or a change until the board reviews, submits a request for the administration to raise her salary in conjunction. So it's essentially 2 steps. The first step would be for the board to vote in open session to raise the salary band.
To just raise the band?
To either raise the band or to set the new minimum and the new maximum for that classification. The second step would be for the board, after the approval has been granted from the administration, to then vote again as to whether to raise Dr. Brown's salary.
Mr. DeBrownstein, you look, you're still thinking.
But when I've looked at other CEA positions, there's a very broad range, amazingly broad. I think too broad in some circumstances.
For the CEAs, yes. However, this is not a CEA position. It's an exempt position, which has it has a defined minimum and a defined maximum.
Okay, so if my concern is years down the road, we've all grown healthier and it's time to bring in a new EO, but they don't have the qualifications, they don't meet the standard, and I might want to consider bringing that person in at a lower level with more room to expand. We wouldn't be able to do that because we've increase the maximum, or the minimum at this point?
Well, then in that scenario, you would probably bring in the candidate at the minimum salary for that range, or for the executive officer position, to give them that flexibility to grow within that position.
Okay. All right.
Yes, Dr. Basti Martinez, and then Ms. Norton.
Given the dialogue and exchange here, I would suspect there must be some ruling or some protocol about bringing individuals in at the max?
To bring in individuals at the maximum range, the administration has always asked for copies of, to verify salary, or to verify compensation within the past 12 months, especially for these sort of positions that are unable to determine what the classification was currently being, what the prior classification that they were earning in.
Ms. Norton, I'm sorry. Ms. Norton.
Couple of questions so that I can make sure I understand. So what I have in front of me that is labeled the exempt category salary chart, under the Board of Vocational Nursing Psychiatric Technicians, this is the current band? So the minimum salary and the maximum salary are listed there?
Correct.
And Dr. Brown falls somewhere within there?
Yes.
Okay. And when was the last time that this band was updated?
The band has been updated incrementally, that whenever the state has experienced cost of living increases, that the band is incrementally increased to commiserate with that. So I believe that the last increase was 2.5%, which was what was the last time that this salary band was increased, was, I want to say, about 2 years ago.
And then, so how do, I'm not a state employee, so I don't understand. How do annual raises increase?
I'm sorry, can you repeat
How
the
do,
question?
how do your, because you said that she comes up for a performance review in March, correct?
Correct.
So would we be limited to the maximum on her, to raise her to on a performance review?
Correct. What has happened historically with other boards, especially recently with a lot of executive officers being already either near the max or at the max, is that boards have had to take a look and see, has the role of the executive officer grown? Has this role grown? Has there been additional duties and responsibilities? And because one of the things that you want to look at is that when an executive officer's salary grows, it allows the structure underneath to grow as well. Because if it's capped at a certain level, it creates this wall that will not allow other classifications to grow in there. So it'll grow sideways in terms of more positions, but it may not be able to grow in terms of either oversight or additional CEA positions.
And is that purview for the board to do, or does California HR have to do that?
In terms of increasing the salary?
In terms of looking to see if the position has grown and deserves a different...
No, that's a decision for the board to make in closed session.
Okay,
And then
and then we would turn that into Cal HR as a proposal?
We turn it into the administration, who consults with Cal HR.
Thank you.
Don, I just wanted to clarify with you that we're maxed. Pardon me? We're maxed.
So she's already at the max.
Samantha, do you have a proposed motion for this?
In 1 minute, I will. I will allow you to make one.
No, go ahead. I'm ready.
The one thing I did want to add, because I did speak with HR about this and DCA staff, is my concern that the position has taken on increased responsibility because of the restructuring that we have pursued. So the position is, while it still has the same categories underneath it, while the job description still fits, there's a lot of wiggle room in there. And with our restructuring, there is a lot more emphasis on the EO. It's quite different from what it was before. And so just some things that Vice President Moreno and I had talked about was just the things we were seeing that, hey, maybe this isn't competitive. The things I've been seeing with the restructuring, wow, this EO position is blossoming. there's more, there's a higher level, more things to be done, sort of that change. So it was a accumulation of things that, that we talked about, and then said, Vice President Moreno agreed that we should move forward, and so that's where we're at now. Since I'm the one who just asked to be this to be put on the agenda, I would like to not make the motion. Mr. DeBrownstein, did you have a comment?
I have nothing.
What do you want to make a
At this
motion,
point.
she's saying?
No, I'm fine with you making.
No, I'm not. I don't want
She's
to
not
make the
gonna do
motion
it.
because I asked it to be put on the agenda.
Do you have a vice president that might be more comfortable making the motion?
Yeah, and if I could just get direction on the exact language, but I think you know the intent of what the motion I'd like to make.
I think the question is,
What's the next?
what is the right motion for us to make so we can move this
I'm looking
forward?
for the direction for the verbiage. What do you need?
To increase the salary band, is that what?
So what the board would need to do is take a vote in open session in terms of increasing the salary band. And then from that vote, a letter will be generated from the Madam President to the to the administration with the specific salary band that it is being increased to.
Okay, then let me give this a shot. I would like to make a motion to raise. I move to raise the maximum end for the position of Executive Officer of the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians.
Second.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Is a move and a second, but I see some concerned looks, no?
No, just a question,
Yes, Mr.
Madam
Durkee.
President. Is it to raise the the ceiling, or is it to increase the band?
Yeah, I believe we want to increase the band.
It met your criteria?
So you have the option of increasing the band, the minimum and the maximum, or just the maximum.
If the intent.
Is this discussion?
Yes,
If there is input for clarification purposes, then please.
Dr. Baste Martinez.
In this day and age, when you're saying expand the band and I hope I'm not hearing, and also the minimum to lower, I would not suggest that. To raise it beyond what is currently the maximum, absolutely. Also, if I'm understanding the CEA classification, can we get into that?
In what manner?
If it is of a higher degree, the range will be higher. Did I understand that right?
Correct. For the CEA classification, it is it's the highest level in the civil service in the merit system. It has three categories: an A level, a B level, and a C level. And the C level is the highest level. However, one of the changes within the CEA band is that it will, within all of the CEA bands, is that the recent changes to it allows for the executive officer to dictate what the salary will be for that classification.
So Dr. Baste Martinez, I just want to make sure that we're clear. The EO position is not a CEA position.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at our whole range here. We've got issues around salaries throughout the unit.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Also, I wanted to seek one clarification from you because I'm seeing confused looks at various places. We're now talking about either expanding or raising the maximum, or option 2, increasing the band, which would take up the minimum and take up the maximum.
Correct.
Correct. If we increase the band, or no, if we do not increase the band, if we only increase the maximum, that may or may not affect our current EO.
Correct.
Correct. If we increase the band, which raises the minimum and the maximum, that would have an effect on our current EO.
It may, depending on how it's changed.
Okay.
Can you explain why it may or may not?
If if the minimum, that it is, the new minimum does not exceed the current maximum, then, and if it falls somewhere in between, it won't impact Dr. Brown. However, if the new minimum far exceeds the maximum, then she would more than likely be brought up to the new minimum. I understand, it's very complicated.
I might need a picture.
You understand?
Ms. Norton?
I know what he's saying. Yes.
So I guess I just wanted to let you know where my mind is at. I feel very unprepared to move on this at all, seeing how this is the very first time that I'm seeing it. I'm not part of the executive committee. I wasn't part of the hiring committee. I frankly have a grasp on what Dr. Brown's duties are, and by no means is this reflective on her. I think she does a great job. But in order to make a determination that we need to expand the band because the current job is outweighing the previous one, we would need to be able to see that. And I don't particularly think that with what's being presented right now that we are seeing that, so.
And it was also the worry about the competitiveness of the salary in general.
I understand, but the information that's in front of us, I'll just speak for myself. The information that's in front of me right now, well, I would love to give everybody a raise. I have to be able to, we have a fiscal responsibility as well, and I have to be able to substantiate that, yes, this is what we need to do. And given a 5-minute presentation, 25-minute presentation, I'm just not ready to do that.
I understand. And Ricardo can attest to the fact that we had many emails with many different DCA staff back and forth discussing ways we could or could not discuss this.
Correct.
Whether it be in open session, closed session, who needed to be involved, if there was a vote that needed to be taken. So there was several different staff, several different legal counsels, a lot of DCA involved in our email communications back and forth. And it was finally determined at the highest level that we did in fact have to discuss this in the format that we are discussing it today, which comes with its own challenges, as Ms. Norton described. I would have loved and actually requested to discuss this in a different format, but was told that just because of the way our board is made up and the legalities that was not possible. So I anticipated those concerns and tried my hardest to have this done a different way, but.
So then I would like to make a motion that we.
Well, we have a current motion.
I didn't think we had a current motion.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Andrew has a current motion on the floor. We got to deal with that first, but we also have other comment from this side. So,
I didn't think there was a second to Andrew's I don't think he finished his motion.
Yeah, it was Andrew's motion.
I seconded.
Oh.
And then seconded.
Madam President, would you please restate the motion?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let Ms. Avella ask.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Mr. Deerking.
Yes, just to be clear, for the EO exempt position, there are step increases available.
I can't hear.
We can't hear you.
There are step increases available for an exempt position?
They are done.
Or is it flat across the tenure of the incumbent?
The increases are done through the annual evaluation of the executive officer.
Okay, but there are step increases allowable within the framework of...
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Bassney, or Ms. Mendoza.
But if they're at their maximum, they no longer get step increases, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So long as they are still within the
range.
band.
Okay, I'm looking for hands, I'm looking for faces. There has been a request to restate the motion, and also there was some motion towards me from Vice President Moreno that there may need to be some wording clarification.
Right, I'm going to amend my motion, and I move to increase the salary band for the position of the executive officer of the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians.
Just to be sure, because I did second, that's to increase the upward, not the lower.
And the lower, increase the minimum.
Oh, the bands will go up and down.
Bands.
Okay.
The lower would not go lower, the lower would also go higher.
That's why I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
To clarify. Yes, I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we're dealing with the motion on the floor currently. If this motion fails, we do have a request to make an alternate motion that we then would address. Before we, wait, you stay there. Before we go any further, since there's a motion on the floor, we do need to take public comment. So I want to see if there is any public comment on this motion at this time. I see maybe some people moving towards me. Yes, ma'am.
Noreen Marks, Department of Consumer Affairs. I'm not sure if Mr. Dela Cruz would be able to take that motion and do what he needs to do with that without some indication of what the raise of the ban might be, the increase of the ban might be. That's my first comment. My second comment is I wanted to echo, I think, what I think one of the board members was referring to, which is that if you keep your minimum close to what it is, but increase the maximum, that you may have more options in the future with, if there should be a change of the position, the EO position.
Thank you. I think we have more public comment.
Thank you, members. I can say for 3 times now I have spoken to the new EO. And oftentimes when we hire someone for a position, we see the caliber of the person right at that moment and we get excited about that person and we say they may be a good fit for our program or our business. And then when we get them on board, they wither on the vine and they don't meet the standard we thought they had because we saw such great performance. In my 3 encounters with Dr. Brown, she has not only performed outside of the realm of human possibility for this board, she made an attempt to not only hit the ground running, but she knocked the door down. Now, to say that is to say that she recognized her opportunity to do something for the state of California, and that was work, hard work. Unfortunately, sometimes that hard work takes negative turns, but I think she's capable of turning those things around. From what I have seen from afar and up close, she has maximized the maximum so far. And if that's any indication of where she's going, on behalf of this board and the state of California, to raise the minimum and the maximum to make sure whatever it is, that when it's time to give her the money, i.e. show me the money, as they said on the movie, then do so. Because it is not the failure of the board actually to perform its due diligence for the staff. What happened was the staff early on, that included Ms. Anderson and those predecessors that are not at the table, is because the state of California stopped the momentum, ended the money. They are entitled to what they do. They do hard work, even though I may agree or disagree on occasion. But at this juncture, when you have the opportunity not to do what past performances were, and they were to say, well, no, not right now. That came from DCA. Well, we'll look at it later. And later and later and later, you lost more and more and more qualified people, and then people didn't come back to the table. I don't need, as a public consumer, to have the lowest of the low and the uninformed and the uneducated person deciding decisions on what's going to happen. I need the best every day, all day, anytime, anywhere. And this board has an obligation, as I see you are committed to that obligation, to find whatever vehicle it is that raises the standard, i.e. raises the income of any and all, the staff, and especially this EO who says, I'm going to qualify myself by saying to the staff at the board, maybe listening today, I'm going to make life better. I'm going to decrease your workload and make it manageable. I'm going to take away your fear. I'm going to remove hostilities in the workplace. I'm going to do whatever I can, and at the same time, I'm going to stand forward to the state and say, we are behind, we have work to do, we have a lot to do. And Madam President, you said that to the legislative body at the Sunset Review. You said, I'm going to dig in deep.
I did say that.
There is much to do. We have made mistakes. The state deserves more, the programs deserve more, the board deserves more. Now you all have an opportunity to do more with what you have. I thank you for your consideration. I appreciate you, Dr. Brown.
Is there any other public comment? It is 5:01, so I want to see if there's more public comment. If not, we're going to move into further board discussion.
Oh.
I think we might have a...
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to reiterate what I think Ms. James Perez said initially, that this has nothing to do with Dr. Brown. This really is a general discussion
Yes.
about what the salary, an appropriate
Exactly.
salary range should be, which is why this is an open session, because it has nothing to do with Dr. Brown personally.
Ms. Abella?
Well, I just, I don't want to repeat what she said, but I wanted to say that as well. I mean, this is a discussion about our exempt salary structure, and frankly, its implications on our budget and beyond Dr. Brown's tenure. So this isn't a vote about Dr. Brown and how we feel about her.
Correct. This was something that we were looking at as a position and over different boards and interstate. That was something, that was how it became an issue, initial issue. So there is a motion on the floor, and it has been seconded. If I see no further discussion by the board, I would like to take...
May I restate what I said earlier?
Yes, Dr. Basti Martinez.
I asked about the CEA, and I'm saying this to clarify and to make it clear in the room about why I said it. I asked what can be done about that, because it's my understanding as I look at the band across this information, it is about salaries, budgets in this organization. It's not about any individual.
Correct. Thank you for that
Call for
clarification.
the question.
And the question has been called. I'll take a roll call vote, starting on my far left with Ms. Norton.
Abstain?
Okay, let me just write real quick write this down.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Basti Martinez.
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza.
Yes.
Vice President Moreno.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Mr. DeBronstein.
Yes.
Ms. Avella.
Abstain?
And Mr. Durkin.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 7 yeses and 2 abstentions, meaning motion passes. Mr. De La Cruz, if you would like to come up. I believe we'll be in further contact then, because you said we would take some action.
Yes.
The letter, okay. So I look forward to the further contact with you on that.
Thank you.
And thank you for your report, Mr. De La Cruz. Thank you for staying.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on.
Is there going to be a second motion about what you want the increase of the band to be?
That was not, as Mr. De La Cruz mentioned, that would be indicated, that's something that you and I would know?
Madam President.
Let me get some clarification from Ricardo.
So what the board could do is submit a letter based on the vote for today, indicating what the salary will be for the administration to take into consideration.
I'm sorry, I'm just confused because we had a previous discussion including deputy director in legal, and I was, what I thought I was advised was that then I myself or the executive committee would discuss with DCA and have the research and establish that the board voted to increase the band or not. That's what,
Correct, and
Yes.
once that, in the letter that will then,
Yes.
that will essentially be submitted to the administration, will indicate what that band will be,
Okay.
based on the vote that was taken today.
so we do not need
Based on the vote that was taken moments ago.
moments ago.
So then you'll be notifying of what the increase is. So you're saying, are you saying that they have no control over what that would be?
Are you submitting the letter to us, or are we submitting the letter to you?
No, the board will submit a letter to the administration for
The full board
consideration.
or
By way of you.
by me?
Madam President, I have a,
Mr. Deerking, and then over here on the left, I'm not sure who's indicating, Mr. Deerking.
what I would like to do would be to direct our executive committee to develop a salary band in consultation with our Department Personnel Office.
Mr. Deerking, you're a ray of sunshine today. That's what and if I misunderstood, I apologize. That's what I thought I was told on our last conference call, was that would be the procedure. Let me get board member questions on the left, because now I'm wondering, now I'm confused.